Hey friends, welcome to the Horror Sleep. Almost 90% of you watching aren't subscribed. If you enjoy these true park ranger horror stories, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps the channel. Oh, and where are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments. Do you know that feeling when you sense something is wrong but can't quite figure out what the problem is? That's exactly how I felt when Clara radioed me about a missing hiker. The problem wasn't the phone itself. We get these kinds of calls more often than you'd think in Glacier. The problem was the weather forecast streaming across my computer screen while Clara was on the phone. A warning about an expected severe snowstorm. It was predicted to reach us by nightfall. Wind speeds would exceed 60 miles per hour. And somewhere on Frostline Ridge, a college student had gone missing. My name is Logan Branson, and I've been working as a park ranger in Glacier National Park for 7 years. I've pulled people out of crevasses, talked people off the edge of cliffs, and once tracked a grizzly bear curious about camp coolers for 3 days. But I have to say what happened that day at Frostline Ridge still keeps me up at night. Not because of what we found, because of what we didn't find. Clara Hensley met me at the Northeast Trailhead just after dawn. She'd been with the Park Service for 12 years, 4 more than me, and I trusted her judgment completely. When Clara said something was wrong, something was wrong. "His name's Marcus Webb," she started. "Wait, Webb?" I interrupted. "Any relation to the family that—" "Different Webb," she cut me off quickly. "Marcus Chen. I don't know why I said Webb. Marcus Chen, 23 years old, graduate student from the University of Montana. Left the lodge yesterday morning for what he called a quick day hike up to Mirror Lake." I was already shaking my head. Nobody does Mirror Lake as a day hike this time of year. That's what I told his girlfriend when she called it in at midnight. Kid didn't come back. Didn't answer his phone, didn't check in like he promised. She waited 12 hours because she thought maybe he'd just lost track of time or his phone died. Clara handed me a photo printed from the girlfriend's Instagram. Marcus Chen looked exactly like you'd expect. Young guy with that eager expression people get when they're about to do something they think is adventurous. He was wearing a bright blue jacket in the photo, the kind of thing that would stand out against snow. That was good. Everything else about the situation was bad. "How experienced is he?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Girlfriend says he's done plenty of hiking, in summer, in the Cascades." Clara's tone said everything. Summer hiking in Washington wasn't the same as November in Glacier. Not even close. The trailhead was empty except for 2 vehicles. Clara's Ranger truck and what I assumed was Marcus's beat-up Honda with Montana plates. A parking pass dated yesterday sat on the dashboard. I checked the back seat through the window. Sleeping bag, some protein bars, a tent that looked like it had never been used. So he'd at least packed some emergency gear, even if he hadn't planned to use it. "Footprints in the snow lead north toward the ridge trail," Clara said, pointing to a set of tracks that disappeared into the tree line. "Single set, looks like hiking boots, size 10 or 11 maybe. Fresh snow covered most of them, but you can still make out the pattern near the parking lot." I studied the tracks. They were partially filled with wind-blown snow, but still visible enough to follow. The tread pattern was consistent with modern hiking boots, nothing unusual, but the spacing bothered me. The steps were too far apart for casual hiking, especially uphill. He'd been moving fast. "Why was he rushing?" I said, more to myself than Clara. Maybe he realized the weather was turning. Maybe. But the forecast yesterday had been clear until evening. Marcus should have had plenty of time for a day hike, even to Mirror Lake and back. Unless something had changed his plans. We geared up quickly. The temperature was already dropping, hovering around 15 degrees, and the wind was picking up. I could smell the storm coming, that particular metallic scent the air gets before heavy snow. We had maybe 6 hours before conditions became dangerous. After that, we'd have to turn back whether we'd found him or not. The trail started easy enough, a gradual incline through dense lodgepole pine forest. The trees provided some shelter from the wind, but they also created shadows that played tricks on your eyes. More than once I thought I saw movement in my peripheral vision, just to turn and find nothing but branches swaying. Clara took point, following the footprints where they were still visible. I kept my eyes on the forest, watching for any signs of someone leaving the trail. About 45 minutes in, we found the first thing that made my stomach drop. It was a granola bar wrapper, caught on a low branch about 3 feet off the ground. Same brand that had been in Marcus's car. The wrapper was pristine, no weathering, definitely from yesterday or today. But here's what bothered me. It was tied to the branch, not caught by accident, deliberately knotted around the wood. "Trail marker," Clara said, untying it carefully and bagging it as evidence. Smart kid, he was making sure he could find his way back. Then where is he? We kept moving. Every 15 minutes or so, we'd find another marker. A piece of torn bandana, a strip of duct tape wrapped around a tree trunk. Each one carefully placed, each one exactly where you'd want a marker if you were trying to navigate back in low visibility. Marcus Chen might have been inexperienced with winter hiking, but he wasn't stupid. The trail grew steeper. We were above the tree line now, exposed to the full force of the wind. The footprints were harder to follow here, but they were still visible, still moving in the same direction. Always north, always uphill, and always alone. That's when we found the first thing that really didn't make sense. We'd been hiking for almost 2 hours when we reached a flat section of trail that curved around a massive boulder. The snow here was relatively undisturbed, protected from the worst of the wind by the rock formation. And there, clear as day, were Marcus's footprints. But they weren't continuing along the trail. They walked up to the boulder, circled it once completely, then walked back the way they'd come. For about 30 feet, the prints retraced their path perfectly, stepping in the same tracks. Then they stopped. Just stopped, mid-stride, and started going north again in a completely different direction, cutting across open ground toward a steep ravine. "What the hell?" Clara knelt down, studying the prints carefully. "It's like he walked back, then jumped forward 20 feet and kept going in a new direction." "Ground's too uneven for jumping that far," I said, "especially uphill. Then how? I don't know." We followed the new line of prints toward the ravine. The ground here was treacherous, loose rock covered with a thin layer of ice. Not somewhere you'd want to be moving fast, but the spacing of the footprints suggested Marcus had been nearly running. The prints led right to the edge of the ravine, and for a horrible moment I thought we were about to find a body at the bottom. But the tracks didn't go over. They stopped exactly at the edge, both feet together, toes pointing down into the 50-foot drop. And then nothing. No prints leading away, no signs of a slide or fall, just 2 clear boot prints at the edge of a cliff and then empty snow in every direction. Clara and I stood there for a long moment, not speaking. The wind howled across the ravine, carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin. I could feel the storm getting closer, could feel the pressure dropping. We needed to make a decision soon. "Could he have jumped across?" Clara finally asked. I looked at the ravine. It was maybe 12 feet wide at this point, narrower than some places, but still a hell of a gap, especially with ice on both sides. The far edge was slightly lower, which would help, but the landing zone was nothing but jagged rocks and frozen ground. "I wouldn't try it," I said. "Not without a running start, and there's no tracks showing a run-up. Then where did he go? That's when I noticed something else. On the far side of the ravine, barely visible against the snow, was another set of prints. They started about 4 feet from the edge, right where someone might land if they'd made a desperate jump, and they continued north along the ridgeline. But these prints were different. Same boot tread, same size, but the stride was all wrong. They were close together, shuffling almost like someone injured or exhausted. And every 5th or 6th step there was a drag mark, like one foot wasn't lifting properly. "Clara," I said quietly, "look at the far side." She pulled out her binoculars, studied the prints for a long moment. When she lowered them, her face had gone pale. "That's not possible," she said. "Nobody could make that jump. Not with a full pack. Not at this altitude. Not, I know. So, what are we looking at here, Logan?" I didn't have an answer. The rational part of my brain was trying to work through the possibilities. Maybe Marcus had backtracked and we'd missed the real trail. Maybe there was a snow bridge over the ravine that had already collapsed. Maybe the wind had played tricks with the prints, filling in some and leaving others visible in a pattern that just looked impossible. But I'd been doing this job long enough to trust my gut, and my gut was telling me something was very wrong with this whole situation. We spent 20 minutes working our way down into the ravine and back up the other side. It was dangerous, slow going, the kind of terrain that could easily turn a rescue mission into a double fatality. By the time we reached the top, we were both breathing hard, and my hands were numb despite my gloves. The prints on the far side were exactly where we'd seen them from across the ravine. Same tread pattern, same size, definitely made by the same boots Marcus had been wearing. But up close, the shuffling gait was even more pronounced. Every few steps, there was a small divot in the snow, like he'd stumbled or caught his foot on something. "He's hurt," Clara said. "Moving like this, he's definitely hurt. Then we need to move faster." We followed the prints north along the ridge. The terrain here was more exposed, nothing but snow and rock, and the occasional twisted pine clinging to life in the harsh conditions. The prints stayed visible, kept leading us onward, but they never got any fresher. It was like we were always exactly 3 hours behind him, no matter how fast we moved. After another hour of hiking, we reached an area where the trail passed between 2 large rock formations, creating a natural corridor about 15 feet wide. The prints led straight through the middle, but halfway through the corridor something changed. The left foot prints stopped. I'm not talking about the tracks ending. The right foot kept going, kept making prints in the snow every 2 feet or so, but the left foot just stopped leaving marks. For 20 feet, there were only right foot impressions, each one slightly deeper than before, like Marcus had been putting all his weight on one leg. Then, just as suddenly, the left foot prints came back. But they weren't in the right place. They appeared offset, about 6 inches to the side of where they should have been based on his gait, and they were different now, shallower. The tread pattern wasn't as clear. "Equipment failure?" Clara suggested. "Maybe his left boot was coming apart?" Both boots looked fine in the car. Then what are we looking at? I knelt down, studying the prints carefully. The right foot was digging deep, consistent pressure. Normal walking pattern. The left foot was barely making an impression, like it was touching down but not bearing weight. Or like something was wrong with the leg itself. "I think he was dragging it," I said slowly. "The right foot is supporting him, the left is just there, dragging it for 20 feet, then suddenly using it normally again." I didn't say it made sense. We kept moving. The corridor opened up onto a wide plateau, and that's where we found the second marker that made us stop completely. Sitting in the middle of the trail, arranged in a neat line, were 6 rocks. Each one was about the size of my fist, and each one had been carefully placed with maybe 2 inches between them. They formed a perfect straight line pointing directly north, and in the snow beside them, written in block letters with what looked like a stick, was a single word: Mirror, Mirror Lake. That's where Marcus had been headed. The rocks were pointing the way, but Mirror Lake was still 3 miles off, and these rocks hadn't been here when we'd patrolled this trail 2 weeks ago. Marcus must have placed them, must have taken the time to arrange them carefully, leave a message for anyone following. But why? If he was injured, why waste time making trail markers? And why use rocks instead of his supplies? We'd found pieces of his bandana, his duct tape, even the granola wrapper. Why not use something that actually belonged to him? Because he ran out of supplies to mark with, Clara said, reading my thoughts. This is all he had left. Then he's been moving for a long time. Longer than one night. That doesn't make sense. He left yesterday morning. It's only been, she checked her watch, 26 hours. I know. But the evidence was right there in front of us. The progression of markers told a story. Early ones were items from his pack, things easy to grab. Later ones became more desperate, torn pieces of clothing. And now, rocks. The last resort of someone who had nothing left to mark their trail with. We pressed on, following the line of the rocks northward. The wind was really picking up now, strong enough that we had to lean into it to make progress. Snow was starting to fall, light flurries that would turn into a full blizzard within the hour. We were running out of time. "Logan," Clara called from ahead. "You need to see this." She was standing at the edge of a frozen stream, pointing down at something. I jogged over, fighting the wind, and looked where she was indicating. The prints led down to the stream's edge, then across the ice, then up the far bank. Normal enough. But right in the middle of the frozen stream, the ice was cracked in a perfect circle about 4 feet across. The cracks radiated outward like a spider web, and in the center you could see dark water beneath. "He fell through," Clara said. "Had to. This ice is only a few inches thick here. Then where's the hole?" That's what didn't make sense. If Marcus had fallen through the ice, there should have been a break in the surface, jagged edges, signs of someone struggling to climb back out. But the ice was intact, just cracked, like something heavy had been placed on it carefully, pressing down without breaking through, or like something under the ice had been trying to push up. I shook that thought away. The cold was getting to me, making me imagine things. We crossed the stream carefully, testing each step, and picked up the trail on the far side. The prints were getting harder to follow now, the falling snow filling them in almost as fast as we could track them. But they were still there, still moving north, still leading toward Mirror Lake. We'd been hiking for nearly 5 hours when we finally saw it. The lake spread out below us, a vast expanse of white that seemed to glow in the dim afternoon light. The surface was completely frozen, smooth as glass, and the mountains reflected perfectly in the ice like a mirror. It was beautiful in that way that cold, deadly things can be beautiful. The footprints led right down to the lake's edge. We followed them carefully, watching for any signs of Marcus himself. Maybe he'd made it this far and collapsed, was somewhere nearby waiting for help. Maybe he'd found shelter, was holed up in one of the emergency supply boxes we kept scattered around the park's remote areas. But as we got closer to where the tracks met the lake, something about them changed again. They didn't stop at the edge. They kept going, right out onto the ice, straight toward the center of the frozen lake. "No," Clara said softly. "No, don't tell me he walked out there." I pulled out my binoculars, scanning the lake's surface. The footprints were clear, a single set of tracks marching in a perfectly straight line from where we stood to a point about 300 yards out. And there, at the end of the line, I could just make out a shape. Something blue against the white. Marcus's jacket. "Contact search and rescue," I said, already moving down toward the lake. "Tell them we've found him. We're going to need medical. Logan, wait." Something in Clara's voice stopped me. She was looking through her own binoculars aimed at the same spot I'd seen the jacket. Her hands were shaking and not from the cold. "What is it?" "The tracks," she said. "Look at where they end." I raised my binoculars again, focused on the blue jacket lying in the snow. The footprints led right up to it, both feet visible in the last few steps. And then they stopped. The jacket was lying there, still partially inflated, like someone had just shrugged it off. But there were no prints leading away from it. No signs of anyone walking back towards a shore. No body lying nearby. Just the jacket, and the tracks that ended right next to it, and then nothing but unmarked snow in every direction for 300 yards. "Where did he go?" Clara whispered. The wind picked up, howling across the frozen lake, and the first heavy snow of the storm began to fall. We stood there at the edge of Mirror Lake, staring at that lonely blue jacket, and I realized with a sick feeling in my stomach that we weren't going to find Marcus Chen. Not today, maybe not ever, because whatever had happened to him out there on the ice, it wasn't something that made sense. It wasn't something that followed the normal rules of search and rescue. And as the blizzard closed in around us and the visibility dropped to near zero, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that something out there on that frozen lake was waiting to see what we'd do next. We had maybe 20 minutes before the storm made any further rescue attempts suicidal. The wind was already strong enough that Clara had to shout for me to hear her, and the snow was coming down so thick I could barely see 30 feet ahead. "We can't go out there," she was saying. "Ice hasn't been tested. We don't have safety lines, and even if we reach the jacket, there's no guarantee." I know. I did know. Every part of my training said, turn back, call it in, wait for proper equipment and better weather. But every part of my gut said that if we left now, we'd never find out what happened to Marcus Chen. The storm would cover everything, and that blue jacket would be buried under 3 feet of snow by morning. I made a decision that I'm still not sure was the right one. "I'm going to the jacket. You stay here, keep me in visual contact. If anything happens, if the ice cracks or I fall through, you radio for help, and you don't come after me, understood?" Clara started to argue, then saw the look on my face and just nodded. 10 minutes, Logan. You get 10 minutes out there, then you're coming back whether you found anything or not. Deal." I stepped out onto the ice carefully, testing each step before committing my full weight. The surface was solid here, at least 6 inches thick, plenty to support me. But ice is tricky, especially lake ice in November. There could be weak spots, air pockets, places where underground springs kept the water from freezing properly. One wrong step, and you're in water cold enough to stop your heart in minutes. The footprints were already filling with snow, but they were still visible enough to follow. I walked carefully, placing my feet exactly where Marcus had stepped, figuring if the ice held him, it would hold me. The wind was stronger out here away from the shore, nothing to break its force, and it pushed against me like a physical thing trying to drive me back. 50 yards out. The jacket was clearer now, definitely Marcus's, that bright blue synthetic material that was supposed to keep you warm in temperatures down to 0. It was lying flat on the ice, arms spread, like someone had carefully placed it there. Not tossed, placed, 100 yards. I could see my breath freezing in the air, could feel ice crystals forming in my beard. Behind me, Clara was a small figure at the lake's edge, and I could see her waving, probably trying to tell me to come back. I kept walking. 150 yards. This was farther out than I'd ever gone on frozen lake ice. The shore looked impossibly distant now, the trees reduced to dark smudges against the white. It was quiet out here, despite the wind. That peculiar muffled silence you get when snow dampens every sound. Like being inside a tomb, 200 yards. I could see details on the jacket now. It was definitely Marcus's. I could see the university logo on the breast. But there was something else. Something dark on the collar. I moved faster, my boots crunching on the ice. 250 yards. Almost there, Salar. The footprints led right up to the jacket, both feet visible in the last few steps. Size 10 or 11 hiking boots. Same pattern we'd been following all day. They stopped exactly where the jacket lay, and that's when I saw what was on the collar. Blood. Not a lot, just a few dark spots on the blue fabric, frozen solid. But enough to make my chest tighten. Marcus had been bleeding. From where? How much? And where the hell was he? I knelt down next to the jacket, careful not to disturb anything, and that's when I noticed the ice beneath it. There was something wrong with the surface. It looked different here, lighter somehow, like it was newer than the ice around it. I pulled off my glove, reached out to touch it, and my hand went through. Not through the ice. Through something else. The surface felt solid under my fingers, felt like ice, but it moved when I pressed on it. Like a membrane. Like skin. I jerked my hand back, heart pounding. What the hell? I looked closer, really studied the area around the jacket. The footprints led up to this spot, stopped at the edge of this circle of strange ice, and then nothing. The circle was maybe 5 feet across, perfectly round, and the ice within it was definitely different. Smoother, almost translucent. And when I looked really carefully, I could see something beneath it. Movement. Something was moving under the ice, slow and dark, like oil spreading through water. I watched, transfixed, as shapes formed and dissolved in the ice below me. They looked almost like handprints, like someone under the ice was pressing up against the surface trying to get through. My radio crackled. Clara's voice, distant and distorted. "Logan, time, coming back?" "Yeah," I said into the radio, not taking my eyes off the ice. "Yeah, I'm coming." But I wasn't moving, because the shapes under the ice were becoming clearer, more defined. And they definitely looked like hands now. Multiple hands. Too many hands. All pressing up against the underside of the ice, fingers splayed like a crowd of people trapped under the surface, all trying to break through at once. Something cold that had nothing to do with the temperature crawled up my spine. I grabbed Marcus's jacket, careful not to touch the blood, and started backing away from that circle of strange ice. The shapes followed me. Not fast, but deliberately, tracking my movement across the frozen surface. Wherever I stepped, the hands would press up beneath my boots, and I could feel them through the ice, could feel the pressure of something trying to push through. I turned and ran. Professional wilderness rangers aren't supposed to run across untested ice. We're supposed to be calm, methodical, safe. But right then, I didn't care about protocol. I ran like hell back toward the shore, Marcus's jacket clutched in one hand, my radio bouncing against my hip. Behind me, I could hear something, a sound like ice cracking, but rhythmic, like footsteps. I didn't look back. Clara grabbed me as soon as I reached the shore, pulling me off the ice and back onto solid ground. "What happened? I saw you run. I thought, we need to go, now." "Did you find him?" "No, just this." I held up the jacket. "Then where—" "I don't know, Clara, but we need to get off this mountain before the storm gets worse." She started to argue, then saw whatever expression was on my face and just nodded. We started back up the trail, moving as fast as the terrain and weather would allow. The snow was coming down hard now, visibility down to maybe 15 feet. The wind howled through the trees, and every time I heard it, I thought about those shapes under the ice, those hands pressing up against the surface. We'd been hiking for maybe 10 minutes when Clara stopped suddenly. "Logan, look." She was pointing at something ahead on the trail. It took me a moment to see it through the snow, but when I did, my blood ran cold. Footprints, fresh footprints, same boot tread we'd been following all day, but these were coming from the opposite direction, heading back down the trail toward the parking lot. And they were filling with snow fast. Couldn't have been more than 5 minutes old. "That's impossible," Clara said. "We just came from the lake. We would have seen anyone coming back up the trail." "I know. So, who made these tracks?" I didn't answer because I didn't have an answer. But as we stood there in the growing blizzard, I became aware of something. That feeling of being watched that I'd had earlier, down by the lake, it was back. Stronger now, and it wasn't coming from behind us. It was coming from ahead. "Clara," I said quietly. "How far to the parking lot?" "Maybe a mile." "Why?" "Because I think we should get there as fast as possible." We started moving again, following our own tracks back down the mountain. The fresh boot prints paralleled ours for a while, then diverged, cutting off through the trees toward a section of trail we'd passed hours ago. Part of me wanted to follow them, wanted to find out who or what was making those prints. But the rational part, the part that had kept me alive through 7 years of ranger work, said, "Get to the truck and get off this mountain." We were maybe a quarter mile from the trailhead when we saw the second thing that shouldn't have been possible. Standing in the middle of the trail, facing away from us, was a figure. Tall, wearing what looked like hiking gear, completely motionless despite the wind and snow. It was too far away and too obscured by the weather to make out details, but something about its posture was wrong. The way it stood too still, the way its arms hung at odd angles. "Hey!" Clara shouted. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The figure didn't respond, didn't move at all, just stood there in the middle of the trail like a statue. We approached carefully, and as we got closer I could make out more details. It was definitely wearing hiking clothes, a jacket and pants that looked soaked through. The jacket was dark, maybe green or brown, impossible to tell in this light. And the way it was standing, both feet were planted firmly, toes pointing forward, but the body was tilted at an unnatural angle, like someone leaning into a wind that wasn't there. "Hello?" I called. "We're park rangers. Are you hurt?" Still no response. We were close now, maybe 20 feet away. I could see the back of its head, see dark hair plastered down with snow and ice, see the way its shoulders were hunched forward, see... It turned around. I've seen a lot of things in 7 years as a ranger. I've seen the aftermath of bear attacks, seen bodies pulled from crevasses, seen the effects of severe hypothermia and frostbite. But I'd never seen anything like the face that turned toward us in that blizzard. It wasn't Marcus Chen. It was someone else, someone older, with a beard and weathered skin. But that's not what made me take an involuntary step backward. It was the eyes. They were open, staring right at us, but they were wrong. Frosted over, covered with a thin layer of ice like the surface of the lake. And behind that ice, something moved, something dark that swirled and shifted like smoke in water. The figure's mouth opened, slowly, mechanically, like a puppet being operated by someone who didn't quite understand how jaws worked. And from that mouth came a sound that definitely wasn't human. A low, sustained note that seemed to bypass my ears entirely and resonate directly in my chest. "Run," I said to Clara. "Run now." We ran, again. Down the trail, slipping on ice, branches whipping at our faces. Behind us, I could hear that sound continuing, that awful, not quite human tone that made my teeth ache and my skin crawl. And beneath it, other sounds. Footsteps. multiple footsteps, more than just one set. They were following us. The parking lot appeared ahead through the snow, and I've never been so relieved to see asphalt in my life. Clara's truck was where we'd left it, covered in a thin layer of snow but otherwise undisturbed. We sprinted toward it, fumbling for keys, and I risked one glance back toward the trail. There were 3 figures standing at the tree line now, the one we'd seen, plus 2 more, all standing in that same unnatural posture, all with those frosted-over eyes, and all staring directly at us with an intensity that felt physical. We threw ourselves into the truck. Clara gunned the engine, and the tires spun on the icy parking lot for one horrible moment before finding traction. We fishtailed out onto the access road, leaving the figures behind. Neither of us spoke for the first 10 minutes. Clara focused on driving through the increasingly dangerous conditions, and I focused on trying to get my heart rate back to something approaching normal. Marcus's jacket was in my lap, the blood on the collar a dark reminder that whatever we'd encountered, it had definitely hurt him. Maybe killed him. What were those things? Clara finally asked. I don't know. Did you see their eyes? The ice? I saw. Logan, what the hell is happening on that mountain? I don't know, I said again. And I didn't. But I was starting to have theories, and none of them were good. We made it back to the ranger station just as the full force of the blizzard hit. Within an hour, visibility was 0, and the roads were completely impassable. We were stuck there for the night, along with 3 other rangers who'd been out on various patrols and made it back just in time. I filed a report about Marcus Chen, missing hiker, last seen on the Mirror Lake Trail, believed to be in distress. I included the jacket we'd found, the blood on it, the strange footprint patterns. What I didn't include was anything about the figures we'd seen, the ice that felt wrong, the shapes moving beneath the frozen lake. Who would believe that? Hell, I wasn't sure I believed it, and I'd seen it with my own eyes. Clara sat across from me in the break room, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. We have to go back, she said quietly. In this storm? No chance. And even if the weather clears, we're not going back out there without backup. Marcus Chen is still out there somewhere. Is he? I looked at her. Be honest with yourself, Clara. What do you think happened to him? She was quiet for a long moment. I think something on that mountain killed him. Something that doesn't make sense. Something that left footprints that ended in impossible places and put those things at the tree line. Yeah, that's what I think too. So what do we do? That was the question. Protocol said we organize a proper search and rescue operation as soon as weather permitted. We'd bring in dogs, additional personnel, maybe even helicopter support if the storm cleared enough. We'd comb every inch of Frostline Ridge and Mirror Lake until we found Marcus Chen or confirmed he'd left the area somehow. But I'd seen those things at the tree line. I'd felt those shapes moving under the ice, and some part of me knew that no amount of search and rescue was going to find Marcus Chen, because wherever he was, it wasn't somewhere that could be reached with conventional methods. Around midnight, after the other rangers had gone to sleep, I pulled up the park's historical records on the computer system. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe reports of other strange incidents around Mirror Lake. Maybe past disappearances. Maybe something that would make sense of what we'd seen. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Mirror Lake had a history. A bad one. In the past 50 years, 6 people had gone missing in that area. All of them were experienced hikers. All of them disappeared in late fall or early winter. And not one of them had ever been found. The first was in 1974. A park ranger named Thomas Harlow. He'd gone out on a routine patrol of the frozen lake and never came back. His truck was found at the trailhead. His footprints led out onto the ice, and then nothing, just like Marcus. The second was 1983. A wildlife biologist named Sarah someone, I couldn't read the last name in the old records. She'd been studying mountain goat populations around the lake. Last seen heading toward the frozen shoreline. Never seen again. The pattern continued. 91, 1998, 2004, 2012, all of them in November or December, all of them around Mirror Lake. All of them with the same elements. Footprints leading onto the ice, no signs of struggle, no bodies ever recovered. And here's the thing that made my blood run cold. In each case, there had been reports of strange sightings in the days following the disappearance. Figures standing at tree lines, people with frosted eyes, sounds that didn't quite sound human. I was about to dig deeper into the records when Clara appeared at my shoulder, making me jump. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Look at this." I showed her what I'd found. She read through the reports, her expression growing darker with each case. "Why didn't anyone tell us about this?" she said. 6 people in 50 years, all in the same area, and nobody thought to mention it. Maybe they didn't want to create panic. Or maybe, I hesitated, maybe people did report it, and nobody believed them. "What do you mean?" I pulled up another file, this one from 1998. It was a supplementary report filed by a ranger named David Norton, who'd been part of the search effort for one of the missing hikers. Most of it was standard search and rescue documentation, but there was a section at the end that caught my eye. During the search of the Mirror Lake area, I observed what I initially believed to be other searchers at the north tree line. However, upon approaching these individuals, I found their appearance and behavior to be highly unusual. They did not respond to verbal communication and seemed physically incapable of normal movement. I radioed for backup, but by the time other rangers arrived, the figures had disappeared. I am filing this report for the record, though I acknowledge it may sound unusual. I am certain of what I saw. Below that, in a different handwriting, someone had added, "Ranger Norton was found to be suffering from exhaustion and mild hypothermia at the time of this observation. No corroborating witnesses, filed for record only." "They didn't believe him," Clara said. "Would you, if you hadn't seen what we saw today?" She had no answer to that. We spent the rest of the night going through the old files, piecing together a pattern that nobody had seen because nobody had been looking for it. Every disappearance happened during a cold snap. Every one coincided with Mirror Lake being completely frozen over. And in every case, there had been some report, usually dismissed, of strange figures, impossible footprints, or sounds that didn't quite make sense. Something was happening at Mirror Lake, something that had been happening for decades, and Marcus Chen was just the latest victim. By morning, the storm had passed. The world outside was transformed, buried under 3 feet of fresh snow that glittered in the early light. It was beautiful. It was also a death sentence for anyone caught out in it without proper equipment. The park superintendent arrived around 10 a.m., along with the search and rescue coordinator from the county. We briefed them on what we'd found, showed them Marcus's jacket, explained about the footprints and the impossible distances. What we didn't tell them was what we'd seen. The things at the tree line, the shapes under the ice. Call it self-preservation or call it cowardice. But neither Clara nor I wanted to be the next Ranger Norton, filing reports that would be dismissed as exhaustion and stress. The search was scheduled to begin as soon as the access roads could be cleared. That would take at least another day, maybe 2. In the meantime, all we could do was wait, and hope that whatever was out there on Frostline Ridge stayed where it was. The official search and rescue operation began 3 days after Marcus Chen disappeared. By then, the storm had fully cleared, and we had perfect conditions. Bright sun, clear skies, and enough snow on the ground that any tracks would be visible for miles. 12 rangers, 6 sheriff's deputies, 2 canine units, and a helicopter with thermal imaging equipment. It was the most comprehensive search effort I'd seen in my 7 years at Glacier, and I knew, with a sick certainty in my stomach, that it wouldn't find anything. I was assigned to a team covering the southeastern section of Mirror Lake. Clara was with a different group heading north. The coordinator wanted us split up since we'd already covered the western approach during our initial search. Sound strategy, but it meant I was going back out there without anyone who'd believe me if things went wrong. My team consisted of me, 2 sheriff's deputies I'd never met, and a ranger from a different district who introduced himself as Marcus. Not the same Marcus we were looking for, but the coincidence still felt like bad luck. We started at the trailhead just after dawn, following a route that would take us along the eastern shore of the lake. The forest was completely transformed from my last visit. Everything was buried under snow, the trees bent under the weight of it. It was beautiful in that picture postcard way that made you forget how deadly winter could be. Our breath steamed in the cold air, and our boots crunched on snow that squeaked with each step. Temperature was maybe 10 degrees, but the sun made it feel warmer. We'd been hiking for about an hour when one of the deputies, a young guy named Mendez, called out from ahead. "Got something here." It was a marker, not one of Marcus Chen's trail markers, but something else. Someone had built a small cairn of rocks at the edge of the trail, carefully stacked maybe 2 feet high. And balanced on top was a single evergreen branch, still green, freshly broken from a tree. "What is this?" Mendez asked. "Some kind of trail marker?" "Wrong time of year for trail maintenance," I said. "And that branch is fresh. Somebody placed it recently." "Could be from another search team," the other deputy suggested. "Could be." But something about it bothered me. The cairn was too neat, too deliberately constructed, and the branch seemed like it was pointing, angled to indicate a direction off the main trail. We marked the location on our GPS and kept moving. But over the next hour, we found 3 more cairns, each with a fresh evergreen branch on top. And they were leading us somewhere, drawing a line through the forest that curved gradually toward the frozen lake. By noon, we'd reached the eastern shore of Mirror Lake. The ice stretched out before us, that same mirror-smooth surface I'd seen from the western side 3 days ago. Somewhere out there was the spot where I'd found Marcus's jacket, where I'd seen those shapes moving under the ice. We were supposed to search the shoreline, document any tracks or signs of passage, but stay off the ice until it could be properly tested. That's when we saw the figure. It was standing about 100 yards offshore, right in the middle of the frozen lake. A person in dark clothes, completely motionless, facing away from us. Just like the figures Clara and I had seen at the tree line. "Hey!" Mendez shouted. "You need help? You shouldn't be out there." The figure didn't respond, didn't even turn around. "This ice hasn't been tested," I said quietly. "Nobody should be out there." "Then who the hell is that?" the other deputy asked. We stood there for a long moment, watching the figure. It still hadn't moved. The sun was bright on the ice, and I could see the person clearly. Male, I thought, based on the build. Wearing what looked like a heavy coat and pants, dark hair, standing with both feet together, arms at their sides. "I'm going to call it in," I said, reaching for my radio. That's when the figure turned around. Even from 100 yards away, even with the sun in my eyes, I could see that something was wrong with its face. It was pale, too pale, and the eyes, even at this distance I could see that they weren't right. "Is he okay?" Marcus asked. "He's not moving naturally." "No," I said, "he's not." The figure stood there for another moment, facing us. Then, very slowly, it raised one arm and pointed. Not at us. Past us. Back toward the forest. "What's he doing?" Mendez said. "Warning us," I said quietly. The figure lowered its arm, and then it started walking. Not toward us, away from us, deeper onto the lake, heading toward the center. Its gait was wrong, that same shuffling motion I'd seen in the footprints 3 days ago. And as it walked, I could see something dark spreading across the ice behind it. A shadow that moved wrong, that seemed too thick to be just a shadow. "We need to get it on thermal," Marcus was saying into his radio. "Get the helicopter over to the eastern shore of the Mirror Lake. We've got a possible survivor on the ice." But I knew what we were seeing wasn't a survivor. The helicopter arrived maybe 15 minutes later, the whoop-whoop of its rotors echoing off the mountains. We watched as it circled over the lake, the thermal imaging operator scanning the ice for heat signatures. The figure we'd seen was gone, disappeared into the landscape somehow, but the operator's voice came crackling over the radio. "Negative on heat signatures. No living persons detected on or near the lake surface." "That's impossible," Mendez said. "We just saw someone out there." "Negative," the helicopter repeated. "Nothing alive within a 100-yard radius of your position." Nothing alive. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. We'd been standing there for 20 minutes, watching that figure walk across the ice. All 4 of us had seen it, and the thermal imaging said there was nothing there. "Logan," Marcus said quietly. He was looking at the ice where the figure had been standing. "What are those?" I followed his gaze. There, clearly visible in the snow on the frozen surface, was a set of footprints. They started about 10 feet from shore, right where we'd seen the figure, and they led out onto the lake in a straight line. But they were going the wrong direction. The figure had walked away from us, heading toward the center of the lake. But the footprints led toward the shore, toward us, and as I watched, another print appeared in the snow. Then another, like someone invisible, was walking toward us across the ice. "Back up," I said. "Everyone back up now." We retreated from the shoreline, moving back into the tree cover. The footprints kept coming, kept appearing one after another in the fresh snow. They reached the shore, stepped up onto the bank, and entered the forest, heading right for where we were standing. "What the hell is this?" Mendez had his hand on his weapon, though what he thought he was going to shoot I had no idea. The prints walked past us. Not toward us. Past us. They moved through our group, between me and Marcus, and continued up the trail, back toward the cairns we'd found, back toward the parking lot. We followed them. What else could we do? The prints were clear, fresh, appearing in the snow maybe 10 feet ahead of us as we walked. Whatever was making them was leading us somewhere. The trail curved back into the forest, and the prints followed it exactly. After about 10 minutes, we came to a section of trail we'd passed earlier, the area where the first cairn had been. The prints led right up to it, circled it once, then stopped. Just stopped. No more prints appearing, just empty snow ahead of us and that neat little pile of rocks with its evergreen branch pointing off into the trees. "Okay," Marcus said. "I'm officially creeped out." "We need to report this," the other deputy said. "Report what?" I asked. "That we saw footprints appear out of nowhere. That thermal imaging shows nothing alive, but we all saw a person on the ice. Who's going to believe that?" "You're saying we shouldn't report it?" "I'm saying we report that we saw what appeared to be a person on the ice, but they disappeared before we could reach them. We report the footprints, but we don't—" I struggled for words. "We don't try to explain it, because we can't." They agreed reluctantly. We continued our search pattern, documenting everything carefully, taking photos of the prints and the cairns. By late afternoon, We'd circled back to the northeastern section of the lake where Clara's team was supposed to be operating. We found them gathered at the shoreline, clustered around something. As we got closer, I could see Clara standing slightly apart from the group, her face pale. When she saw me, she walked over quickly. "Logan," she said quietly, "we found something." She led me to what the group had found. It was another jacket, not Marcus Chen's blue one, but an older jacket in green and brown, weather-beaten, partially frozen, and when one of the search and rescue people turned it over, we could see a name patch sewn onto the breast. Thomas Harlow, the ranger who disappeared in 1974, 50 years ago. His jacket, lying on the shore of Mirror Lake like it had been placed there yesterday. "That's not possible," someone was saying. "That jacket should be degraded, buried, gone. It can't just be lying here in perfect condition after 50 years. But it was, and when they checked the pockets, they found Harlow's wallet, his ranger badge, his car keys, everything intact, everything preserved as if no time had passed at all. "There's more," Clara said to me, even more quietly. She pulled me aside, away from the group. "We found footprints, lots of them. All different sizes, all different tread patterns. They start at the waterline and lead into the forest in every direction. Logan, there are dozens of sets of prints, maybe hundreds. How many people are we talking about? I don't know. But some of those footprints..." She pulled out her phone, showed me photos she'd taken. "Some of them are too small, like children. Or the prints are spaced wrong, like whatever made them wasn't walking normally." I looked at the photos. She was right. The prints were everywhere, a chaotic mess of tracks coming out of the lake and spreading into the forest. And some of them definitely looked wrong, too narrow, or with toes bent at strange angles, or with a gait that no human could manage. "They're coming out of the lake," I said. "Whatever they are, they're coming out at night and walking into the forest. But why? What are they doing?" I didn't have an answer, but I was starting to understand why this area had such a high rate of disappearances. Mirror Lake wasn't just a dangerous place, it was actively taking people. Somehow. And then something was coming out of that lake at night, wearing their forms, walking their paths. The search continued for another week. We found no sign of Marcus Chen's body. No more evidence of where he'd gone after leaving his jacket on the ice. But we found other things. More old clothing, some dating back decades. Personal items that matched the descriptions of missing persons from years past. And every night, the thermal imaging showed nothing on the lake. Every morning, there were new footprints on the shore. On the 8th day, the search was officially called off. Marcus Chen was declared missing, presumed dead. His girlfriend was notified. His family was notified. The case was filed away with the others. Another unexplained disappearance on Frostline Ridge. Clara and I were the last ones to leave the search area. We stood at the western trailhead, looking back toward where Mirror Lake lay hidden among the peaks. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of orange and red. "We can't let them keep using this trail," Clara said. "Not until we understand what's happening. We can try to get it closed, but we'd need a reason, a real reason. Not ghost stories and impossible footprints. So what do? We document everything. Every incident, every strange sighting, every unexplained disappearance. We build a case that even the superintendent can't ignore, and we watch that lake. Because whatever's happening there, it's been going on for decades, and it's not going to stop just because we're paying attention now." We drove back to the ranger station in silence, but as we pulled into the parking lot, Clara's phone rang. It was one of the search and rescue people, a woman named Kowalski who'd been part of the documentation team. "You need to hear this," Kowalski said over the speaker. We were reviewing the helicopter footage from the thermal imaging, going through it frame by frame, and we found something. When the helicopter flew over the lake that first day, over the spot where you found Marcus Chen's jacket, the thermal imaging picked up something. Just for a few frames, maybe 2 seconds of footage. But it's there. What did you find? Clara asked. Heat signatures. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. All under the ice, all moving. They're only visible for those 2 seconds, then they disappear. But Logan, Clara, whatever those things are, they're not human. The signatures are all wrong. Too cold to be living people, but too warm to be just water. Can you send us the footage? I'm sending it now, but there's something else. We checked the exact timestamp when those signatures appeared. It was 3:17 p.m. on the first day of the search. Do you remember what you were doing at 3:17? I thought back. The first day, we'd been on the eastern shore. We'd seen the figure on the ice, watched it walk away from us, watched the footprints appear heading toward the shore. Yeah, I said. We were watching something that shouldn't have existed. That's what I thought. Because the thermal signatures appear at exactly the same moment you reported seeing that figure. Whatever you saw on the ice, it was calling them, bringing them up from underneath, all of them. The video file came through on Clara's phone. We watched it together in the parking lot. The sun fully set now, just the light from the phone screen illuminating our faces. The thermal imaging showed the lake as a field of blue and purple, indicating cold. And then, for just 2 seconds, it lit up. Dozens of bright spots, yellow and red heat signatures, spreading out from a central point like a flower blooming. They moved beneath the ice, swirling in patterns that looked almost like a dance. Then they were gone, the screen returning to uniform cold blue. But in those 2 seconds, I'd seen something else. The heat signatures weren't random. They formed shapes. And if you looked at them just right, they almost looked like hands. Lots of hands. All reaching up toward the surface, all reaching up toward where we'd been standing. We're not going back there, Clara said quietly. No, we're not. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Because people would keep hiking that trail. Students from the university, experienced climbers, tourists who didn't know the history. They'd keep going to Mirror Lake because it was beautiful, because it was challenging, because it was there, and every few years, when conditions were right and the ice was thick enough, something in that lake would take another one. That was 3 years ago. Marcus Chen's disappearance remains unsolved. The trail to Mirror Lake stays open, and every November, when the first hard freeze hits and the lake surface turns to glass, I think about those heat signatures swirling beneath the ice. I think about the footprints that appeared out of nowhere. I think about the figure on the frozen lake, pointing back toward the forest, trying to warn us. I'm not a park ranger anymore. After what happened, I couldn't keep going back out there. Couldn't keep pretending that everything was normal. Clara quit 6 months after I did. Last I heard, she was working for the Forest Service in Oregon, as far from frozen lakes as she could get. But sometimes, late at night, I still get phone calls. Unknown numbers. I never answer them, but they always leave the same voicemail. No words, just a sound. That low, sustained note that I heard from the figure at the tree line. The sound that bypasses your ears and resonates directly in your chest. I don't know what's in Mirror Lake. I don't know if it's something natural that we don't understand or something else entirely. But I know this. It's still there, still waiting, still taking people when conditions are right. And sometimes, on the coldest nights of winter, I dream about ice, about smooth, frozen surfaces that look solid but aren't, about shapes moving in the darkness beneath, about hands pressing up from below, fingers splayed trying to reach through trying to pull you down to where they are. I deleted those dreams when I wake up. I tell myself it was just stress, just the trauma of a bad search and rescue operation. I tell myself that there's a rational explanation for everything we saw, that we just haven't found it yet. But I don't believe it, and neither did Marcus Chen in those last moments before he walked out onto the ice and disappeared. Neither did Thomas Harlow in 1974, or Sarah in 1983, or any of the others. They all saw something out there on that frozen lake, something that made them keep walking, kept them moving forward even though every instinct must have been screaming at them to turn back. And now, when I hear about disappearances at Glacier, when I see news reports about missing hikers or unexplained incidents near Mirror Lake, I know what really happened. I know where they went. They're under the ice, all of them, waiting in that cold darkness, becoming part of whatever lives in those depths. And someday, when conditions are right, they'll come back out. They'll walk on the frozen surface. They'll leave footprints that lead nowhere. They'll stand at tree lines with frosted eyes and try to warn others away. But nobody will listen. Nobody ever does. Because Mirror Lake is beautiful, because the mountains are calling, because people always think it won't happen to them. The ice was 3 feet thick when I first heard it. I know because I just finished drilling the test hole, my auger breaking through into the dark water below with that satisfying crunch that means you've done your job right. 3 feet, 2 inches to be exact. Well, within safety parameters for the weight restrictions we'd need to enforce once we opened this section of Clearwater Lake to winter recreation. I'm Haley Mercer. I've been a park ranger at Glacier National Park for 9 years, and ice measurement is one of those routine tasks that sounds dangerous but really isn't. You drill holes at predetermined intervals, measure the thickness, document the data, and move on. It's methodical, predictable, boring even, until it isn't. The sound came about 30 seconds after I'd pulled the auger out of the hole. I was kneeling on the ice, writing down the measurements in my waterproof notebook, when I heard it. A deep, resonant thud from somewhere below me. Not directly under my position, but close, maybe 50 feet away, maybe 100. Hard to tell with ice. Sound travels strangely through frozen water. I stopped writing, held my breath, listened. The lake was silent except for the wind skimming across the surface and the distant calls of ravens in the pines along the shore. I counted to 30. Nothing. Must have been the ice settling, I thought. Happens all the time when temperatures fluctuate. I went back to my notes. That's when the second thud came. Louder this time. Definitely louder. And slower, more deliberate. Like something striking the underside of the ice with force. With intention. I stood up slowly, my knees cracking in the cold. The temperature was hovering around 10 degrees, and even through my insulated pants I could feel the chill radiating up from the frozen surface. Clearwater Lake stretched out around me in every direction, a vast expanse of white that met the gray November sky at a horizon so flat it looked painted. Thud, thud, thud. 3 more strikes in quick succession. I could feel them now, vibrations traveling through the ice and up through the soles of my boots. My first thought was trapped air, gas bubbles forming under the ice and releasing. But gas doesn't make regular patterns. Gas doesn't keep rhythm, because that's what this was doing. The thuds were coming at regular intervals now, maybe 5 seconds apart, and they were getting closer. I could track their approach by the way the sound changed, grew more immediate, more present. Whatever was making this noise was moving under the ice, moving toward me. I grabbed my radio. "This is Ranger Mercer to base. Do we have any diving operations scheduled on Clearwater today?" Static, then the voice of Beth from the main office. Negative, Haley. Lake's been closed to diving since October. Why? I'm hearing something under the ice. Something that sounds like... The thud that came next was so loud it made me jump backward. It came from directly beneath my feet, so powerful I could see a thin crack appear in the ice around the test hole I'd just drilled. Not a structural crack, just a stress fracture, but still, that took serious force. Haley, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. I'm coming back to shore. Something's not right out here. I started moving, walking quickly, but not running. Running on lake ice is a good way to fall and crack your skull. The thuds followed me. Every 5 steps I took, another impact would sound beneath the ice, tracking my movement with eerie precision. Like something pacing me, like something following. By the time I reached the shore, my heart was hammering and my breath was coming in short gasps that had nothing to do with physical exertion. I looked back across the lake. The ice looked peaceful, undisturbed. If I hadn't felt those vibrations myself, hadn't heard those sounds with my own ears, I could almost convince myself I'd imagined it. Almost. Rowan Pierce was waiting for me at the ranger station when I got back. He'd been monitoring the radio traffic and came over as soon as he heard my transmission. Rowan and I had worked together for 6 years, and I trusted his judgment more than anyone else's in the park. "So, what did you hear out there?" he asked, pouring me a cup of coffee from the station pot. I wrapped my hands around the mug, trying to get feeling back into my fingers. Something hitting the ice from underneath, regular intervals, following me. Following you, moving in the same direction I was moving, keeping pace. Rowan frowned. Ice settling can sound like a lot of things, especially when you're out there alone. I know what ice settling sounds like. This was different. This was deliberate. Deliberate how? I struggled to put it into words. Like something was striking the ice, not randomly, with purpose. And Rowan, the last one, was strong enough to crack the ice around my test hole. That got his attention. "Show me the data." I pulled out my notebook, showed him the measurements. 3 feet, 2 inches, solid ice. Not the kind that cracks from a little settling or thermal expansion. We both knew it. "Could be a lot of things," Rowan said, but his tone had changed. More serious now. Underground current, maybe, or debris trapped under the ice shifting with water movement. Debris doesn't follow people. Confirmation bias does. You hear a sound, you start attributing meaning to it that isn't there. He was probably right. That's what I tried to tell myself as I typed up my incident report that evening. Natural phenomena, likely ice settling or trapped air bubbles. Recommend continued monitoring. Nothing about how the sounds had seemed to track my movement across the lake. Nothing about the rhythmic spacing of the thuds. Nothing about how my gut was screaming that something was wrong. I should have mentioned it, should have been more specific in that report. Because the next morning, everything changed. The call came in at 6:30 a.m. A fisherman named Douglas Pritchard had arrived early for some ice fishing and found something unusual on the lake surface. When I asked what kind of unusual, the dispatcher said she didn't know. Just that Pritchard had sounded really shaken up and wanted a ranger out there immediately. Rowan and I drove out together, reaching the lake just as the sun was starting to break over the eastern mountains. The light hit the ice at a low angle, making every imperfection visible. And there were a lot of imperfections. Pritchard was waiting by his truck at the access road, a thermos of coffee in his hands and an expression on his face that I recognized. The look of someone who's seen something they can't quite explain and isn't sure they want to. "It's out on the ice," he said, pointing. "About 200 yards from shore. I didn't go near it. Something about it just felt wrong." We could see the marks from the shoreline. long, parallel scratches in the ice surface, running in straight lines for maybe 40 feet before abruptly turning at right angles. They looked fresh, the ice shavings still white and loose around the gouges. "Snowmobile tracks," Rowan suggested. "Look at the spacing," I said. "Too narrow, and snowmobiles don't make 90-degree turns like that." We geared up with safety lines and ice picks, then headed out onto the lake. The scratches were deeper than they'd looked from shore. Each one was about an inch wide and a quarter-inch deep, cut cleanly into the ice surface. And they weren't random. They formed a pattern. "Jesus," Rowan said softly. "Haley, are you seeing this?" I was seeing it. The scratches didn't just run in lines. They formed shapes, rectangles mostly, overlapping and intersecting at odd angles. And in the center of the pattern was a circle, maybe 6 feet across, with more scratches radiating out from it like spokes on a wheel. What could make marks like this? Rowan knelt down, running his gloved hand along one of the gouges. The edges are smooth. This wasn't done with a blade or a tool. It's like something scraped across the ice with enough force to cut through, but not enough to be rough about it. "Metal," I said. "Look at the color in the scratch. There's a gray residue." He leaned closer. I was right. There was something in the gouge, a fine gray powder that stood out against the white ice. Rowan pulled out an evidence bag and carefully scraped some into it. That's when I noticed the test hole I'd drilled yesterday. It was about 30 feet from where we were standing, still partially frozen over with a thin skin of new ice. And leading from that hole, in a straight line directly to the pattern of scratches, was a trail. Not scratches, something else. Depressions in the ice, each about the size of a dinner plate, spaced about 3 feet apart. "Rowan," I said quietly, "those weren't there yesterday." He followed my gaze, stood up slowly. The depressions led right from the test hole to the center of the scratch pattern, then stopped. Like something had come up through that hole, crossed the ice, made these marks, and then... what, disappeared? "We need to document this," Rowan said, pulling out his camera. "Every angle, every mark, and we need to close this section of the lake. Immediately." We spent the next 2 hours photographing and measuring everything. The scratches, the depressions, the strange gray residue. By the time we finished, the sun was fully up and the temperature had climbed to maybe 15 degrees. Other fishermen were starting to arrive, and we had to turn them away, explaining that this section of ice was closed pending a safety investigation. Most of them accepted it without question. But one older guy, someone I recognized from previous winters, gave me a look that suggested he knew there was more to the story. "Something happen out there, Ranger Mercer?" Just being cautious. "My grandfather used to talk about this lake," he said, "back in the 20s and 30s before it was part of the park. He said the old-timers knew better than to come out here in winter." "Why's that?" "Because of what lived under the ice." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was talking about the weather. "Of course, that's just old stories, but stories come from somewhere, don't they?" He drove off before I could ask what he meant by that. And maybe I didn't want to know, because standing there on the shore, looking out at those strange marks on the frozen lake, I could still feel it. That sensation of being watched, of being tracked by something I couldn't see. Rowan and I drove back to the station in silence. When we got there, he went straight to his computer to file the incident report while I made coffee and tried to think of any rational explanation for what we'd seen. Ice shift? No, the marks were too clean, too deliberate. Animal? Nothing in Glacier made marks like that. Equipment failure? We hadn't had any equipment on the ice besides my auger, and that was with me the whole time. "Haley," Rowan called from his desk, "come look at this." He'd pulled up the historical records for Clearwater Lake. Not the Park Service records, but older ones. Archived documents from before Glacier became a national park. News clippings, survey reports, incident logs from the 1920s and 30s. "There's a pattern," he said, scrolling through scanned newspaper articles. "Every 10 to 15 years, something happens on this lake. Missing persons, equipment disappearing, strange sounds reported by locals. It all stops in the winter of 1936. What happened in 1936? The lake froze completely for the first time in recorded history. Coldest winter on record. And according to this," he tapped the screen, "a surveying team from the Army Corps of Engineers came out to do some depth measurements. They were testing ice thickness for a proposed winter road that never got built. And one of their team members disappeared, guy named Samuel Ortiz. They found his equipment on the ice, but no body. No tracks leading away. Nothing. He just vanished in the middle of a frozen lake in broad daylight." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Did they ever find him? Not according to these records. The investigation was closed after 2 weeks, presumed drowned, though they never explained how someone drowns through 3 feet of solid ice. Rowan pulled up another document, this one older. A handwritten report from 1928. "Look at this. A trapper named Harold Vance reported seeing something under the ice. He was checking his trap lines along the shoreline when he saw what he described as a dark shape moving beneath the frozen surface, larger than any fish, moving with clear intelligence and purpose. People see a lot of things in shadows and ice. Yeah. But Vance was an experienced trapper. He knew the difference between a shadow and something real. And look what he wrote here at the bottom." Rowan read aloud. "Whatever moves beneath the ice of Clearwater Lake is no natural creature. It does not hunt for food, it hunts for something else. And it knows we are here." We sat in silence for a moment. The only sound the hum of the computer and the distant creak of the building settling in the cold. "You think there's something in the lake?" I said. Not a question. "I think there's something we don't understand. Something that's been there a long time. And I think yesterday, when you drilled that test hole, you got its attention. That's insane." "Is it? You heard those sounds. You felt those impacts. And now we've got marks on the ice that have no rational explanation." He turned to look at me. "Haley, I'm not saying there's a monster in Clearwater Lake, but I am saying there's something down there that we need to take seriously. So, what do? We go back, tonight, when it's dark and quiet. We set up monitoring equipment, cameras, whatever we can get, and we see if those sounds come back." Every rational part of my brain was screaming that this was a bad idea. But the part of me that had felt those thuds beneath the ice, that had seen those impossible scratches, knew Rowan was right. If something was in that lake, we needed to know what it was. Before someone else heard those sounds. Before someone else got too close. We spent the afternoon gathering equipment. Underwater hydrophones to pick up sounds in the water column. Cameras with night vision and motion sensors. A depth sounder to map the lake bottom. And, because neither of us wanted to admit it, but both of us were thinking it, a satellite phone in case our regular radios stopped working. By the time we had everything loaded into Rowan's truck, the sun was already setting. We'd be on the ice in full darkness, which made everything more dangerous. But it also meant we'd have a better chance of documenting whatever was making those sounds, assuming they came back. Assuming we wanted them to come back. The drive to Clearwater Lake was quiet. Rowan focused on the road, which was getting icy as the temperature dropped. I watched the darkness close in around us, watched the trees become shadows, and the shadows become nothing. By the time we reached the access road, I could barely see 10 feet beyond the headlights. We parked and geared up in silence. The air was bitter cold, maybe 5 degrees, and so still I could hear my own heartbeat. The lake stretched out before us, a vast darkness broken only by the faint glow of starlight on ice. No moon tonight, just the stars and the cold and the sound of our breathing. "You ready?" Rowan asked. "No, let's go anyway." We stepped out onto the ice together, our headlamps cutting narrow tunnels through the darkness. The scratches we'd found this morning were barely visible now, just faint shadows in the ice. We headed for the center of the pattern, where the circle and radiating lines met. It took us 20 minutes to set up the equipment. Hydrophones lowered through a test hole in the ice, cameras positioned at different angles, the depth sounder calibrated and ready. Everything linked to Rowan's laptop, which sat inside an insulated case designed for cold weather operations. "Baseline data looks normal," he said, studying the screens. "Water temperature is just above freezing, no unusual currents detected. Depth here is Jesus. Haley, how deep is this lake supposed to be?" "Average depth is about 80 feet. Max depth around 120 in the center channel. Why?" "Because the sounder is reading 300 feet. 300 feet straight down from where we're standing." That wasn't possible. Clearwater Lake had been surveyed dozens of times. Every map, every chart showed a maximum depth of 120 feet. There was no way we were standing over a 300-foot hole in the lake bed. "Equipment malfunction?" I suggested. "Sounder's brand new, calibrated this morning, and look." He turned the screen toward me. The depth reading wasn't just deep, it was irregular. The lake bottom beneath us looked like it had collapsed, forming a pit or shaft that dropped straight down into the bedrock. "That's not on any survey map." "No, it's not." We were standing over something that shouldn't exist, a depth that shouldn't be there. And as that realization sank in, the temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Or maybe that was just my imagination, my body responding to the fear that was starting to creep up my spine. That's when the hydrophones picked up the first sound. It came through the laptop speakers as a low, grinding noise, like metal scraping against stone, but deeper, more resonant. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, then stopped. We both froze, staring at the computer screen. "Did you record that?" I whispered. "Recording everything. Look at the waveform. That's not ambient noise. That's something creating sound, something big." The grinding came again, louder this time. And beneath it, a new sound, a rhythmic thumping that I recognized immediately. It was the same sound I'd heard yesterday, the thuds. But now, with the hydrophones, we could hear them clearly. They were coming from deep below us, rising from that impossible depth. Thud, thud, thud. Each impact sent ripples through the hydrophone data, waves of pressure that peaked and fell with mechanical precision. And they were getting closer, rising through the water column, approaching the ice. "Rowan," I said quietly, "we should go. Wait, look at this." He pointed to another readout on the screen. "The depth is changing. It's getting shallower. Whatever's down there is coming up." The thuds were much louder now, coming through the ice as well as the hydrophones. I could feel them through my boots, could see small puffs of ice crystals jumping with each impact. The cameras were recording everything, their night vision turning the darkness into grainy green images. And then, on one of the camera feeds, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Movement. In the water, visible through the test hole we'd used for the hydrophones. Something dark was rising from below, something large enough to block out the faint light penetrating from above. It came up slowly, deliberately, until it was directly beneath the ice. Directly beneath where we were standing. "Rowan," I said, backing away slowly. "We need to leave right now. I'm getting readings that don't make sense. The object, whatever it is, it's not organic. The sonar signature is showing metal. Haley, there's something metal down there, something big, and it's... The ice beneath us cracked with a sound like a gunshot. Not a structural break. Not yet, but a warning. A stress fracture spreading out from the test hole in a spiderweb pattern. We both jumped back, putting distance between ourselves and the compromised area. The thuds had stopped. Everything had stopped. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. Then, from directly beneath the ice came a new sound. Not thuds. Not grinding. Something else. It sounded like metal chains dragging across stone. Dozens of chains, all moving together, all converging on the point directly beneath us. And then the scratching started. It came from everywhere at once, a horrible scraping noise as something drew across the underside of the ice. We could see it happening, could see new scratches appearing in the surface around us, curling and twisting in patterns that hurt to look at. The gray residue from this morning appeared in the fresh gouges, and up close I could see what it really was. Metal filings. Like something was dragging chains or cables across the ice, wearing them down, leaving traces behind. "Go!" Rowan shouted, grabbing the laptop and yanking the cables free from the hydrophones. "Go now!" We ran. Professionalism and safety protocols forgotten, we sprinted across the frozen lake toward the shore. Behind us, the scratching intensified, the sound of metal on ice rising to a shriek that seemed impossible for any natural phenomenon to create. I risked a glance over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. The ice where we'd been standing was completely covered now, obscured by scratches that formed patterns that looked almost like writing, almost like letters in some language I didn't recognize. And at the center of it all, the test hole was getting wider, the ice around it breaking apart as something pushed up from below. We reached the shore and kept running, not stopping until we were at the truck. Rowan fumbled with the keys, dropped them, grabbed them, finally got the door open. We threw ourselves inside and he gunned the engine, spinning the tires on ice before finding traction. As we pulled away, I looked back one last time. The lake was dark and still, nothing moving on its frozen surface. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that something was under that ice. Something that had been disturbed by my test drill, something that was now awake. And it knew we were there. Neither of us spoke for the first 10 minutes of the drive. Rowan white-knuckled the steering wheel, his eyes locked on the road. I sat rigid in the passenger seat, watching the darkness slide past the windows and trying to process what we'd just seen. Finally, Rowan broke the silence. "Did you see the patterns? The scratches?" "Yeah." They weren't random. They were organized, like it was writing something, or like it was marking territory. I turned to look at him. "We need to report this, now. Not just to the Park Service, we need to bring in experts. Marine biologists, maybe, or geologists. Someone who can tell us what the hell is down there. And tell them what exactly? That we heard spooky sounds and saw some scratches on the ice? That our depth sounder gave an impossible reading? Haley, they'll think we were seeing things. We have recordings, video, data from the hydrophones and depth sounder. Data that shows something that shouldn't exist. A 300-foot deep hole in a lake that's supposed to be 120 feet at maximum. Metal signatures where there should only be water and rock. Sounds that don't match any known animal or geological phenomenon. He glanced at me. "You know how this sounds." I did know. It sounded insane. It sounded like we'd been out in the cold too long and let our imaginations run wild. But I'd felt those vibrations through the ice. I'd seen those scratches appear in real time, and most importantly, I'd seen Rowan's face when he was reading the sounder data. He'd been genuinely shocked, genuinely scared. "What about the historical records?" I said. "The disappearances, the reports from the trappers and surveyors. That's documented evidence going back almost 100 years. Historical records that were dismissed as accidents and overactive imaginations, just like ours will be if we don't have something concrete. What's more concrete than video footage? Video footage that could be explained away as equipment malfunction or environmental factors. You know how this works, Haley. We need something undeniable. Something that proves there's actually something in that lake. We made it back to the ranger station around 11 p.m. The parking lot was empty except for my truck and a few service vehicles. Rowan parked and killed the engine, but neither of us moved to get out. We just sat there in the cab, the heater ticking as it cooled, the darkness pressing against the windows. "So, what do we do?" I finally asked. "We look at the data, all of it, and we try to figure out what we're dealing with." He grabbed the laptop case from the back seat. "Come on, I want to see what the cameras caught." Inside the station, we set up in the small conference room, spreading out the equipment and connecting everything to Rowan's laptop. While it booted up, I made coffee, more out of need for something to do with my hands than actual desire for caffeine. My heart was still racing, my mind replaying the sound of those chains dragging across the underside of the ice. The first camera feed showed the approach to the lake, our headlamps bobbing as we walked out onto the ice. Nothing unusual. The second camera had been positioned to watch the test hole and the scratch pattern. That's where things got interesting. "There," Rowan said, pausing the video. "Watch the ice around the test hole." He played it frame by frame. At first, nothing. Just solid ice. The hole we'd drilled for the hydrophones, our equipment visible in the background. Then, so subtle you could miss it, a change. The ice near the hole started to bulge upward. Not much, maybe an inch or two, but enough to create stress fractures, enough to make the surface ripple like something was pressing up from below. "That's when we started recording the thuds on the hydrophone," Rowan said. He switched to the audio file, isolated the sounds. Thud, thud, thud. Each one synchronized perfectly with a ripple in the ice surface. Whatever was making that noise was also creating physical pressure, enough to deform ice that's 3 feet thick. How much force would that take? Pounds per square inch? I'd have to calculate it, but a lot. More than anything biological could generate, especially at depth. And look here. He advanced the video to the moment the scratching started. This is where it gets really weird. The scratches didn't appear gradually. They came all at once, dozens of parallel lines forming simultaneously across the ice surface. It happened so fast, it looked like CGI, like someone had used computer effects to add the marks in post-production. But this was raw footage, unedited, captured in real time. "It's like something swept across the entire area in a single motion," I said. "Something with multiple points of contact. Maybe some kind of array or mechanism." "A mechanism, under the ice, in a natural lake." Rowan shook his head. "You hear how that sounds?" "I hear it. I'm looking at proof that it happened anyway." He pulled up the depth sounder data, scrolled through the readings. "The depth anomaly is consistent throughout our recording period. 300 feet, give or take a few feet. And look at the shape of it." He highlighted a section of the readout. "This isn't a natural formation. Natural sinkholes and fissures don't have edges this clean. This looks manufactured." "That's impossible. This lake is millions of years old." "Is it? Or is it sitting on top of something older, something that was here before the lake formed?" I started to argue, then stopped, because what he was saying actually made a terrible kind of sense. Glacier National Park sat on some of the oldest rock formations in North America. Precambrian sediment, over 1 billion years old. If something had been built or created in that ancient rock, and later filled with water to become a lake. "We need to see what's down there," I said. Really see it. Not with sonar or cameras from the surface. We need to get under the ice. Ice diving in winter? In a lake that's apparently sitting on a 300-foot pit of unknown origin. That's suicide. Not if we do it right. Limited depth dive, safety lines, full surface support. We've got certified divers on staff. We could organize something for next week. Rowan was quiet for a long moment, staring at the frozen image on his screen, the scratch patterns captured in perfect detail. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but we need authorization, which means we need to file a report, a real one, with everything we know. They'll think we're crazy. Maybe. But if we're right, if there really is something down there, then we need to know what it is before someone else gets hurt. Before another Samuel Ortiz disappears into that lake and never comes back. We worked through the night, compiling our evidence into a comprehensive report. Video footage, audio recordings, sonar data, historical documentation. Everything organized and annotated, presented as professionally as we could manage. By the time we finished, the sun was starting to rise over the mountains, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of orange and gold. I drove home exhausted, grabbed a few hours of sleep, then met Rowan at the district ranger's office at 2 p.m. Michael Torres, our district supervisor, had agreed to review our findings and make a determination about next steps. Torres was in his mid-50s, a career Park Service employee who'd worked his way up from seasonal ranger to district supervisor over 30 years. He was thorough, fair, and not prone to flights of fancy, which made what we were about to tell him even more difficult. We presented our case carefully, starting with the historical background and working forward to our experiences over the past 2 days. Torres listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. When we finished and showed him the video footage, he watched it twice, then leaned back in his chair. "This is extraordinary," he said finally, "and concerning. If there's a structural anomaly in the lake bed, we need to know about it. The safety implications alone. We're requesting authorization for an ice diving survey," Rowan said. "Nothing deep, just a preliminary look to confirm what the sonar is telling us. Ice diving is dangerous even in ideal conditions, and what you're describing sounds far from ideal." Torres pulled up something on his computer. "I'm going to have to run this up the chain. Get approval from regional. In the meantime, I want that section of lake closed to all public access. No fishing, no recreation, nothing. Can you two handle posting signs and perimeter monitoring?" "Absolutely," I said. "Good. And Haley, Rowan, I need you both to document everything going forward. Every sound, every reading, every observation. If there is something unusual happening at Clearwater Lake, I want a complete record of it." We spent the afternoon setting up a closure perimeter around the affected area. Warning signs, barrier tape, even a few trail cameras to catch anyone who ignored the restrictions. By the time we finished, it was getting dark again, and I found myself dreading nightfall in a way I never had before. "You want to grab dinner?" Rowan asked as we were packing up. "Not hungry." "Me neither. But we should eat something. Long night ahead." "Why do you say that?" He pointed toward the lake. The sun was setting, the last light reflecting off the ice surface. And in that light I could see new scratches, dozens of them, covering a much larger area than before. The patterns had spread, growing outward from the center point like frost on a window. Because whatever's under there is getting more active, and I think it's going to keep getting more active until we figure out what it wants. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those scratches, about the sound of chains dragging across stone, about the depth sounder reading that shouldn't be possible. Around 2 a.m., I gave up trying to rest and drove back to the lake. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe more scratches. Maybe nothing. but when I arrived at the access road and killed my headlights, I could see something on the ice. Movement. Multiple points of light bobbing and weaving across the frozen surface. Flashlights. People were out on the lake despite our closure. I grabbed my gear and my radio, called it into dispatch, then headed out onto the ice. As I got closer, I could see 3 figures, spread out in a line, walking slowly and shining their lights at the ice beneath their feet. I recognized one of them, the older fisherman who'd mentioned his grandfather's stories. "Sir," I called out, my voice carrying in the still air, "this area is closed. I'm going to have to ask you to return to shore." The 3 figures stopped, turned to face me. In the backwash from their flashlights, I could see their faces. The old fisherman and 2 younger men, maybe in their 30s. They looked scared. "Ranger Mercer," the old man said. "You need to see this. All of you need to see what's happening here." "What are you talking about?" "The marks. They're not random. My grandfather, he kept a journal, drew pictures of the marks he saw on the ice back in the 20s. These are the same patterns, exactly the same." He pulled out a weathered notebook, handed it to me. The pages were yellowed with age, covered in careful sketches and cramped handwriting. And he was right. The patterns matched, perfectly. Scratches and circles and radiating lines, all identical to what we'd been seeing on Clearwater Lake. "What do they mean?" I asked. "According to my grandfather, they're warnings. Something in the lake trying to tell us to stay away, to stop disturbing it." "Your grandfather thought there was something alive in the lake?" "Not alive, not exactly, but present, aware. He said the old Native American guides he worked with called it the thing that sleeps beneath. They had rituals to keep it sleeping, offerings left on the ice in winter, prayers said before fishing. But after the Park Service took over, those rituals stopped, and the thing started waking up." One of the younger men stepped forward. "We saw something tonight, before you arrived. The ice was glowing, just faintly, but enough to see, a blue light coming from somewhere underneath." "Bioluminescence," I said. "There are organisms that produce light, not like this. This was artificial, like someone turned on a spotlight down there." He pointed toward the center of the lake. It moved, sweeping back and forth, like it was searching for something. I wanted to dismiss it, wanted to explain it away as reflections or vehicle lights from the road. But standing there on the frozen lake, surrounded by impossible scratches and listening to stories that matched a century-old accounts, I couldn't quite manage it. "You all need to leave, now. This area isn't safe. You know what's down there, don't you?" the old fisherman said. "You and Ranger Pierce. You've seen something. I can't discuss an ongoing investigation, but I can tell you that if you don't leave immediately, I'm going to have to cite you for trespassing in a closed area." They left, reluctantly, taking their flashlights and their stories with them. But the old man's words stayed with me. The thing that sleeps beneath. Something that required rituals to keep it dormant. Something that was waking up. I walked out to the center of the scratch pattern, to the point where we'd drilled our test hole yesterday. The ice had refrozen completely, new growth filling in the gap we'd made. But the scratches were still there, and in my flashlight beam I could see something I'd missed before. The gray metal residue wasn't uniformly distributed. It was concentrated in certain areas, forming shapes within the larger pattern. And when I looked at it from the right angle, when I let my eyes unfocus slightly, I could see what those shapes were. Numbers, letters, symbols in a script I didn't recognize but that felt somehow familiar. Like something I'd seen in dreams, or in the fragmentary memories of nightmares I couldn't quite recall. I took photos, documenting everything. As I worked, I became aware of that sensation again. Being watched, being tracked. I spun around, shining my light across the ice, but there was nothing. Just empty, frozen surface stretching to the dark shoreline. Then I heard it. Faint, barely audible over the wind, but unmistakable. That same grinding sound from last night. Metal on stone, rising from somewhere deep below. And with it, a new sound. Something that might have been voices, multiple voices, all speaking at once. The words distorted by water and distance until they were just rhythm and tone. I ran, again. Across the ice, slipping and sliding, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. The sounds followed me, growing louder, more insistent. And beneath my feet, I could feel vibrations, regular and rhythmic, like something massive pacing beneath the frozen surface. I made it to shore and kept running, all the way to my truck. Locked the doors, started the engine, and got the hell away from Clearwater Lake. In my rearview mirror, I could see the ice surface reflecting starlight, and for just a moment, I thought I saw something else. A faint blue glow, just like the fisherman had described, moving beneath the ice, searching. By morning, the request for an ice diving survey had been approved. Regional had reviewed our evidence and agreed that the depth anomaly needed to be investigated. They were sending 2 certified ice divers from the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Department, along with a technical specialist from the USGS who had experience with underwater geological formations. They would arrive in 3 days. 3 days of watching that lake, of monitoring the scratches that continued to spread, of listening for sounds that shouldn't exist. 3 days of wondering what we were going to find when someone finally went beneath the ice. Rowan and I spent those days setting up a proper base camp at the lake. We brought in a portable shelter, heaters, additional monitoring equipment. We established a perimeter around the dive site and set up video cameras to record everything that happened. Whatever was down there, we were going to document it properly. On the second day, something new appeared on the ice. The scratches we'd been seeing were still there, still spreading, but now there were other marks. Deep gouges, wider and rougher than the precise scratches. These looked violent, like something had been clawing at the ice from below, and they were concentrated around the old test holes we'd drilled. "It's trying to break through," Rowan said, kneeling beside one of the gouges. "Whatever's down there, it's trying to reach the surface. Why? Why now? The lake's been here for thousands of years. What changed? Maybe nothing changed. Maybe this is cyclical. The historical records show incidents every 10 to 15 years. Maybe that's how often it wakes up, or how often it gets strong enough to interact with the surface. And my test drill just happened to coincide with its active period. Or triggered it. Think about it, Haley. You drilled through 3 feet of ice, opened a direct path to the surface. Maybe that was like ringing a doorbell." The third day brought the diving team. Amanda Foster and James Kowalski, both veteran ice divers with certifications in technical diving and underwater archaeology. The USGS specialist was Dr. Sarah Manning, a geologist who'd spent 20 years studying underwater cave systems and submerged geological structures. We briefed them on everything we knew: the historical disappearances, the depth anomaly, the sounds and scratches. Dr. Manning was particularly interested in the sonar readings. "This formation," she said, studying the depth charts, "it looks similar to something called a blue hole. Underwater caves or shafts that drop well below the surrounding lake bed. They're usually found in ocean environments, but there are a few freshwater examples." "Could a blue hole form in a lake like this?" Rowan asked. "It's possible. If the bedrock underneath contains limestone or other soluble rock, water erosion over millions of years could create a vertical shaft. But 300 feet? In this geological setting? That would be extremely unusual. What about the metal signatures we're detecting?" Dr. Manning frowned. "That I can't explain. Blue holes are natural formations. They don't contain manufactured materials. Unless what? Unless something fell into the hole at some point. Equipment, vehicles, even aircraft. Large metal objects that settled at the bottom. That could explain the sonar readings. It was a rational explanation. A natural formation with some modern debris at the bottom. But it didn't explain the sounds. It didn't explain the scratches. And it definitely didn't explain the blue glow multiple witnesses had reported. The dive was scheduled for 2 p.m., when the sun would be at its highest and provide maximum ambient light penetration. Foster and Kowalski would go down together, tethered to the surface with safety lines and equipped with waterproof cameras, lights, and sonar devices. Maximum depth was set at 120 feet, the established bottom of the lake according to all official surveys. If they found the shaft that our sonar had detected, they would document it but not enter it. We cut a larger access hole in the ice, using a chainsaw to remove a 4-foot square section. The water beneath was black as oil, giving no hint of what lay below. Foster and Kowalski went through their pre-dive checks methodically, testing regulators, checking gauges, verifying communications. Remember, Dr. Manning told them, if you see anything unusual, anything at all, you document and surface immediately. No heroics. We can always send another team down with better equipment if needed. They nodded, gave us thumbs up, and dropped into the water. For the first few minutes, everything was routine. We could track their descent on the depth monitors, could hear their breathing through the communications system. Visibility was poor, they reported, but manageable. Water temperature was steady at just above freezing. At 50 feet, Foster's voice came through. We're seeing something on the walls, marks or scratches, running vertically. They look old, weathered. Could be from ice movement, but the pattern is very regular. Document and continue, Dr. Manning instructed. 60 feet, 70, the divers were below the established lake bed depth now, descending into the anomaly. 80 feet. Their lights were visible from the surface as faint glows in the dark water. There's a current here, Kowalski reported, pulling downward. Not strong, but noticeable. And the walls are getting closer together. This is definitely a shaft of some kind. 90 feet. 100. They were at the limit of their planned depth now, and we could see their lights had stopped descending. There was a long pause, just the sound of their breathing in the speakers. Then Foster spoke, her voice tight. You need to see this. I'm activating my camera feed. The video came through on our monitors, grainy and dark, but visible. The camera showed the shaft walls, rough rock carved by water erosion. And on those walls, clearly visible in the light from Foster's dive lamp, were more scratches. But these weren't the random marks of geological processes. These were deliberate, organized, carved deep into the rock. Those are tool marks, Dr. Manning said quietly. Someone carved those by hand. At 100 feet underwater? Rowan said. How is that possible? It's not with modern equipment, and definitely not with ancient technology. Unless, she leaned closer to the screen, unless they were carved before the shaft filled with water, before the lake existed. Foster panned her camera down, and that's when we saw it. At the edge of her light's reach, maybe 20 feet below their position, the shaft opened up. The walls fell away into what looked like a much larger space, and in that space, something reflected their light back at them. Metal. Lots of metal. We're going down, Foster said, just to get a better look. Negative, Dr. Manning said immediately. You're at depth limit. You need to... But Foster and Kowalski were already descending. We watched on the camera feed as they dropped deeper into the shaft, their lights cutting through the darkness. 110 feet. 120. The metal reflections were getting clearer now, taking on shape and structure. "Oh my God," Kowalski whispered. "Are you seeing this?" We were seeing it, but none of us could quite process what we were looking at. It was a structure, a building or vehicle or something else entirely, impossible to tell from the camera angle. But it was massive, filling the chamber at the bottom of the shaft, and it was made entirely of metal. Not corroded, not degraded, still holding its shape after however long it had been down there. "I'm reading the metal composition," Foster said, her voice shaking slightly. "This isn't steel, it's not aluminum. I don't know what this is. The spectrometer is giving me readings that don't match any common alloy." "Surface now," Dr. Manning ordered. "Both of you surface immediately." "Wait, there's writing here. Symbols carved into the hull or whatever this is. I'm trying to get close enough to the communications cut out. Not gradually, not with static. Just an instant transition from sound to silence." The video feed continued for another 3 seconds, showing Foster's light moving closer to the metal surface, closer to the strange symbols carved into it. Then the feed died too. "Surface team to divers," I said into the radio. "Foster, Kowalski, respond." Nothing. The monitors showed their depth at 140 feet, still descending. But there was no communication, no video, nothing. Just the steady readout of depth increasing and air supply decreasing. "Pull them up," Dr. Manning ordered. "Use the safety lines. Pull them up now." Rowan and I grabbed the lines, started hauling. The resistance was normal at first, just the weight of the divers and their equipment. Then it increased dramatically, like someone had attached weights to the other end. We pulled harder, both of us straining, and the lines came up a few inches. Then they went slack. "No," Rowan said. "Oh, no. We pulled up the lines as fast as we could. They came up easily now, too easily. When we finally got the ends to the surface, we understood why. The lines had been cut, not frayed or broken, cut cleanly, as if with shears or a very sharp blade. "How deep are they?" Dr. Manning asked, her voice steady despite the obvious fear in her eyes. I checked the monitors. 160 feet, still descending. Air supply at 60%. "Can they surface on their own from that depth?" "Not without risking decompression sickness. They'll need to make staged stops, and they need to start ascending now." But they weren't ascending. The depth reading continued to increase. 170 feet, 180. They were going deeper into the shaft, into whatever structure was down there, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. "Emergency protocols," Dr. Manning said. "Get search and rescue on the line. Get the Coast Guard. Get everyone. We need a recovery team here now." Rowan was already on the phone, explaining the situation to dispatch. I kept watching the monitors, watching the depth increase and the air supply decrease. At this rate, Foster and Kowalski had maybe 20 minutes of air left. After that, the depth reading stopped at 240 feet. The numbers held steady for a moment. Then they started to increase again, but slowly now, erratically, like the divers were moving around rather than descending in a straight line. "They're alive," I said. "Look at the pattern. That's deliberate movement. Or something moving them," Rowan said quietly. The depth reading fluctuated between 240 and 250 feet for the next 10 minutes. Then, suddenly, it started to decrease, rapidly. They were ascending. "Come on," I whispered. "Come on, come on." 200 feet, 150, 100. They were coming up fast, too fast, but at least they were coming up. At 50 feet, we could see their lights through the water, 2 points of white growing brighter as they approached the surface. Foster broke the surface first, gasping and clawing at the ice edge. Kowalski came up right behind her, and we grabbed them both, hauled them out of the water and onto the ice. They were shaking, their faces pale behind the regulators. We got them to shore, got them out of their gear, wrapped them in thermal blankets. "What happened?" Dr. Manning demanded. "What did you see down there?" Foster just shook her head, teeth chattering. Kowalski stared at the lake, his eyes wide and unfocused. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then Foster finally managed. "It's not a structure. It's a vessel. A ship or submarine or something else, but it's operational. The lights were on. We could see them through the portholes, and there was something inside. Something moving." "Moving how?" Rowan asked. "Like machinery. Like the vessel was still running, still functional, even though it's been sitting at the bottom of a lake for God knows how long." She looked at Dr. Manning. "The symbols on the hull, I got photos before the camera cut out. They're not in any language I recognize. But they were glowing. Faintly, but definitely glowing. Like they were powered by something." "What cut your safety lines?" I asked. "We did." Kowalski spoke for the first time, his voice hoarse. "Something came out of the vessel. We couldn't see it clearly, but it had appendages. Tentacles or cables or arms, I don't know. They grabbed our lines, started pulling us toward the hull. We cut ourselves free and swam as fast as we could." "Did it follow you?" "I don't know. We didn't look back. We just swam for the surface and prayed we'd make it. They were lucky. Ascending that fast from that depth should have given them the bends, should have put nitrogen bubbles in their blood and tissues. But they both checked out physically fine, no signs of decompression sickness, like something had protected them during the ascent, or like something had wanted them to make it back to the surface, to deliver a message. We closed Clearwater Lake. Completely. No public access, no recreational use, and absolutely no diving until we understood what was down there. The footage from Foster's camera before it cut out was sent to experts at multiple universities and research institutes. The metal composition analysis went to metallurgists and materials scientists. The responses came back over the next few weeks, and they all said essentially the same thing. Impossible. The metal wasn't any known alloy. Its composition included elements and ratios that shouldn't be stable, shouldn't be able to exist in the same material. The symbols weren't in any documented language, ancient or modern. And the operational status of a vessel at that depth, in those conditions for any length of time, was physically impossible given our understanding of materials science and engineering. But it was there. The sonar confirmed it. The divers had seen it. And whatever it was still active. The scratches on the ice continued to spread all winter. By February, they covered almost the entire frozen surface of the lake, a vast pattern of lines and symbols that grew more complex with each passing week. And every night, people reported seeing that blue glow beneath the ice, moving and pulsing like something breathing. We brought in more experts. Navy engineers, oceanographers, even a team from NASA's astrobiology division. Everyone had theories. An experimental submarine from the Cold War, a sunken aircraft with unusual cargo. Natural phenomena we didn't understand, creating false readings and optical illusions. But none of the theories explained everything. None of them could account for all the evidence. Then, in early March, the ice began to melt. Temperatures rose above freezing, the snow turned to slush, and the frozen surface of Clearwater Lake started to break up. We watched it happen from the shore, monitored it with cameras and sensors, and waited to see what would be revealed when the ice was finally gone. On the day the last of the ice melted completely, something happened. The scratches we'd been seeing all winter, the patterns that had covered the entire lake surface, they weren't gone. They were still there, floating on the water, Not scratches anymore, but something else, a film of metallic particles forming the same patterns, visible from shore as silver lines on the dark water. And then, at exactly noon, the patterns began to move. They swirled and shifted, reorganizing themselves into new configurations. The lines connected, formed shapes, created what looked like a map or diagram. And at the center of it all, directly over the shaft that dropped into the depths, a single message formed in letters that were somehow readable despite being composed of nothing but metal particles on water. Stay away. The particles held that shape for maybe 30 seconds. Long enough for us to photograph it, to document it, to understand the message. Then they sank, disappearing into the dark water, leaving no trace they'd ever been there. That was 3 months ago. Clearwater Lake remains closed. The Navy sent a remote-operated vehicle down to investigate the vessel, but it never made it to the bottom. Something interfered with its controls at 200 feet, and they had to bring it back up to avoid losing it. We don't know what's in that lake. We don't know how it got there. We don't know if it's been there for decades, centuries, or longer, but we know it's aware of us, it knows we're here, and it wants us to stay away. I transferred to a different district. Couldn't keep working around that lake. Couldn't keep feeling those eyes watching from beneath the surface. Rowan stayed. Keeps monitoring the site. Keeps documenting any changes. He calls me sometimes, tells me about new sightings, new reports from people who ignore the closure and venture out onto the water. Most of them come back. Some of them don't. The thing under Clearwater Lake is still there, still waiting, and every time I hear about someone disappearing in Glacier National Park, every time I see reports of strange sounds or lights near frozen lakes, I wonder if it's waking up again. I wonder if the message we saw was a warning or an invitation. Because here's what I haven't told anyone, what I haven't even told Rowan. The night before the ice melted, I had a dream. I was standing on the frozen lake, looking down through perfectly clear ice at the vessel far below, and I could see it clearly, could see every detail of its hull, every symbol carved into its surface. And I understood them, the symbols, the message they carried, as if some part of my brain had been rewritten, taught a language I'd never learned. The message said, "We have been here longer than your mountains. We will be here when your oceans are dust. Stay away from the depths, or join those who have descended before you." When I woke up, I tried to convince myself it was just stress, just my subconscious processing the trauma of everything we'd experienced. But I can still read those symbols. I can still understand that alien language. And sometimes, late at night, I hear the sounds. The grinding of metal on stone, the rattling of chains dragging through water. And I know that whatever is under Clearwater Lake, it touched me when I drilled that first test hole. It marked me, somehow, connected with me in a way I still don't understand. The scratches on my skin appeared a week after the ice melted. Thin, silver lines running up my arms, following the same patterns as the marks on the ice. They don't hurt. They just glow faintly in the dark, pulsing with a rhythm that matches my heartbeat. Dr. Manning says they'll fade with time, that it's probably just a reaction to prolonged exposure to whatever metals were in the water. But I know better. I know what those marks mean. I've been claimed, tagged, marked as property of something that lives in the depths of a frozen lake. And someday, it's going to call me back. I can feel it already, that pull, like a hook buried deep in my chest, attached to a line that runs all the way down through 300 feet of water to something ancient and patient and hungry. Someday, I'll walk out onto the ice of Clearwater Lake. I'll stand over the shaft that shouldn't exist, over the vessel that can't be real, and I'll hear that call loud enough that I won't be able to resist anymore. And I'll descend, just like Foster and Kowalski descended, before whatever was down there decided to let them go. Just like Samuel Ortiz descended in 1936 and never came back. Just like dozens or hundreds or thousands of others have descended over the centuries, drawn by sounds and lights and symbols that burrow into your brain and change you from the inside out. The thing under the ice isn't waiting for us to come to it. It's making us want to come, marking us, preparing us for the descent. And God help me, part of me wants to go. Part of me needs to know what's down there, what's been calling to us through 3 feet of ice and 300 feet of water, what's been scratching messages on frozen surfaces and glowing in the darkness and cutting divers free to carry its message to the surface. Stay away, the message said, but the marks on my skin say something different. They say, come home. The last thing I remember clearly is checking my watch at 6:12 p.m. I know because I made a mental note of the time, thinking I'd be back at the ranger station before full dark if I kept a good pace. Pass 47 isn't a long patrol route, maybe 5 miles round trip through some of the more remote sections of Glacier's backcountry. I'd done it 100 times before. I'm Trent Foster, been a ranger here for 11 years, and I know these mountains like most people know their own neighborhoods. Pass 47 cuts through a narrow section of ridgeline between 2 valleys, threading through rock formations that date back millions of years. It's beautiful country. Harsh, but beautiful. The kind of place that reminds you how small you are. That November afternoon, I was doing a routine winter assessment, checking trail conditions, looking for animal activity, documenting any hazards that might affect hikers once we opened the trails for the season. Standard stuff. The weather was clear, temperature around 20 degrees, and the snow was packed solid underfoot. Perfect conditions. I just rounded a bend in the trail where it narrows between 2 rock faces when I noticed something odd. The air pressure changed. You know that feeling you get in your ears when you're descending in an aircraft? Like that, but sudden. Made me stop and check my surroundings, make sure I wasn't near an overhang that might indicate avalanche danger. That's when I checked my watch, 6:12 p.m. I keyed my radio, standard check-in protocol. Ranger Foster to base. I'm at the northern approach to Pass 47, all clear. We'll check in again at the summit. Dean McAllister's voice came back immediately. He was on dispatch duty that evening, handling radio communications from the warm comfort of the station office. Copy that, Trent. Weather's supposed to hold. You should have a clear run. Roger, Foster out. I remember putting the radio back on my belt. I remember taking 3 more steps forward, my boots crunching on packed snow. I remember noticing how the shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should for that time of evening, reaching across the trail like dark fingers. And then, nothing. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in the snow, not walking, not standing. Sitting, legs stretched out in front of me, my back against a boulder I didn't recognize. My headlamp was on, casting a circle of white light across snow that looked different somehow. The shadows were longer, darker. The quality of the darkness felt wrong, thicker than it should be, like it was absorbing my light rather than just existing in the absence of it. I looked at my watch. 7:47 p.m. An hour and 35 minutes had passed. An hour and 35 minutes that I had no memory of, no recollection of walking, sitting down, turning on my headlamp. Nothing. Just a blank space where time should have been. My first thought was hypothermia. Confusion and memory loss are classic symptoms, but I didn't feel cold. My core temperature felt normal, my fingers and toes still had feeling, and I wasn't shivering. I went through the mental checklist anyway. Was I slurring my words, having trouble with fine motor control, feeling drowsy? No to all of it. Carbon monoxide poisoning? Impossible. I was in open air, no source of combustion anywhere nearby. Stroke? I ran through the fast test. Face, arms, speech, time. Everything checked out normal. Head injury? I felt my skull carefully, checking for bumps, blood, tender spots. Nothing. My helmet was still securely fastened, showing no signs of impact. That's when I noticed my backpack was unzipped. I always keep my pack zipped, always. It's basic wilderness protocol. You don't leave your gear exposed to the elements or give animals easy access to food. But the main compartment was hanging open, the zipper pulled all the way across. The flap was folded back neatly, almost deliberately, as if someone had taken their time going through it. I pulled the pack around, started going through the contents with growing unease. Everything was there. First aid kit, emergency supplies, water bottles, even my lunch that I hadn't eaten yet. Nothing missing. But things were rearranged. The first aid kit, which I always keep at the top for quick access, was now at the bottom. My emergency blanket was unfolded and then refolded, but in a different pattern than the compact square I always use. The compass I keep in the side pocket was now in the main compartment. And it was upside down. Not just turned around. Upside down. The base where the needle swings was facing up. The glass face pressed against the bottom of my pack. Like someone had deliberately inverted it. Like someone wanted to make sure I'd notice it had been moved. I pulled out my radio, my hands shaking slightly now, though not from cold. Foster to base. Dean, you there? Static, then Trent. Jesus, where have you been? You dropped off comms an hour and a half ago. I was about to call search and rescue. What do you mean I dropped off? I just checked in at 6:12. Yeah, and then nothing. Your radio went dead at 6:12. Complete silence. I've been trying to raise you every 10 minutes since then. I was starting to think you'd fallen, hit your head, were lying somewhere unconscious. I looked at my watch again, as if the numbers might have changed. They hadn't. 7:47 p.m. Dean, I don't remember the last hour and a half. There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, could imagine him sitting forward in his chair, trying to process what I'd just said. Say again? I checked in at 6:12, took a few steps forward, and the next thing I know it's 7:47 and I'm sitting against a rock. I have no memory of what happened in between. It's just blank, like someone cut that time out of my life. Are you injured? Showing any signs of head trauma? Confusion, dizziness, nausea? No, I feel fine. Physically, I'm completely fine, but something's not right here. I stood up slowly, swept my headlamp around in a wide arc. I was still in Pass 47, that much I could tell from the distinctive rock formations. The twin pillars of stone that marked the halfway point were visible about 200 yards to my south. But I'd moved. The spot where I'd made my last radio call was maybe a quarter-mile back down the trail. I couldn't have walked that far, climbed up to this boulder, sat down, and turned on my headlamp without remembering any of it. Trent, I need you to make your way back here, now. Don't worry about completing the patrol. Just get back to the station so we can assess your condition properly. We'll get you checked out, make sure everything's okay. Yeah, okay. I shouldered my pack, started walking back the way I'd come. But something made me look down at the snow where I'd been sitting. My headlamp illuminated the area clearly. There were no tracks leading to the boulder. No footprints showing how I'd gotten there. The snow around the rock was pristine, undisturbed except for the impression where my body had been sitting and the shallow depressions where my boots were planted. Like I'd been placed there, or like I'd appeared there. like I'd materialized out of thin air and simply existed in that spot without any connection to the trail below. I played my light around in a wider circle, looking for any sign of how I'd arrived at that spot. Nothing. Just my tracks leading away from where I now stood, heading back toward the trail. But nothing showing how I'd gotten to the boulder in the first place. The snow was deep here, at least 8 inches, and every step I took left a clear, unmistakable print. But there were no prints leading to where I'd been sitting. None at all. "Dean," I said into the radio, keeping my voice steady through force of will. "Something's really wrong here." "What do you mean?" "There are no tracks. No footprints leading to where I woke up. It's like I materialized next to this boulder, like I was just placed here." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear him trying to find a rational explanation, running through possibilities in his mind. "Trent, that doesn't make sense. You must have..." "I'm telling you what I'm seeing. There are no tracks. I'm looking at pristine snow all around this boulder except for where I was sitting and where I'm standing now. And I'm about 15 feet above the trail. I would have had to climb up here. There should be tracks, disturbed snow, something. But there's nothing." Okay, just get back here. We'll figure it out." I started walking, following the trail markers back towards the ranger station. My headlamp beam bounced with each step, throwing shadows that seemed to move wrong, seemed to lag behind the motion that created them by just a fraction of a second. The temperature was dropping fast now, well below 20 degrees, and the wind was picking up, carrying with it a sound I couldn't quite identify. Almost like distant machinery, a low, rhythmic hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. That's when I realized something else was wrong. The trail I was following, the one I'd hiked up just an hour and a half ago, looked different. The snow was deeper in places, shallower in others, and there were tracks, fresh tracks, lots of them. Boot prints, all roughly my size, crisscrossing the trail in patterns that made no sense. Some led forward, toward where I was heading. Others led backward, toward where I'd come from. And some of them just stopped mid-stride, like whoever had been making them had simply lifted off the ground and vanished into the air. I knelt down, examined the prints closely. They were definitely boot prints, the tread pattern matching my own boots exactly. Same size, same wear pattern on the heel and ball of the foot. But the spacing was wrong, too far apart for normal walking. Some strides were 6 or 7 feet long, impossible without running. Too close together for running. Some were overlapped, like I'd been shuffling or dancing. And they overlapped in impossible ways, like someone had walked the same path multiple times from different directions simultaneously. One set of prints caught my attention. They led from the trail up toward where I'd woken up, spaced normally at first. But about halfway up the incline, they changed. The left footprints continued, but the right footprints disappeared. Just gone. For about 10 feet, there were only left footprints, each one deeper than normal, as if all my weight had been on that one leg. Then the right footprints reappeared, and both sets continued up to the boulder. "Dean, I'm seeing tracks. Lots of tracks. They look like mine, but the pattern is... It's not right. It's not possible." "What do you mean, it's not right?" "I mean, they don't follow normal walking patterns. They're going in multiple directions, overlapping. Some of them just ending in the middle of the trail. And Dean, some of them show me walking on one foot. Just one foot, for 10 feet or more. That's not possible. Nobody can walk like that." "Trent, are you sure you're okay? You're not making a lot of sense. I know how it sounds, but I'm telling you what I'm seeing. And I'm not confused. I'm not injured. I'm looking at tracks that can't exist, made by boots that match mine exactly." I kept walking, my eyes on the trail ahead, but my mind was racing. time loss, rearranged equipment, an inverted compass, impossible footprints, no memory of how I'd gotten from point A to point B, and that feeling in the air, that pressure that made my ears pop and my head feel fuzzy. There are stories about this area. I'd heard them from the old-timers, the rangers who'd worked Glacier back in the 60s and 70s. Stories about Pass 47 specifically, about people losing time, about watches running backward, about compasses spinning in circles, about voices heard in the distance that spoke no known language, about lights in the sky that moved in ways aircraft couldn't. Most of us dismiss them as tall tales, the kind of legends that spring up around any remote wilderness area. Every park has them. Stories to tell around the fire, to spook new rangers, to add mystery to long shifts. But now, following my own impossible footprints back toward the station, those stories didn't seem so far-fetched. They seemed like warnings, like breadcrumbs left by people who'd experienced what I was experiencing now, trying to tell the rest of us that something was wrong with this place. The trail emerged from the pass and started its descent toward the valley floor. I could see lights in the distance. The ranger station, maybe 2 miles away. The sight should have been comforting, but something about those lights seemed wrong too. They were flickering, pulsing almost, like they were being viewed through heat waves. But the air was freezing cold. There shouldn't be any heat distortion, and the pattern of the pulsing seemed deliberate, rhythmic, like a code, like something trying to communicate. I picked up my pace, moving faster now, my breath coming in quick white puffs that seemed to hang in the air longer than they should. My watch read 8:15 p.m. That meant I'd been walking for almost half an hour, which felt about right based on the distance I'd covered. Time seemed to be moving normally again, 1 second per second, the way it should. But when I checked my radio trying to call Dean again, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The time display on the radio, which should have been synchronized with my watch through the park's GPS system, read 6:47 p.m. An hour and a half earlier than my watch showed. I stared at the display, trying to make sense of it. Our radios sync automatically every hour with the atomic clock. There's no way it should be off by more than a second or two, let alone 90 minutes. I hit the sync button manually, watched the display. It flickered for a moment, then went back to 6:47 p.m., like it was refusing to accept the correct time. "Dean," I said into the radio, my voice tight. "What time do you show?" 8:17 p.m. Why? My radio is showing 6:47. That can't be right. The system auto-syncs every hour. There's no way it would be off by that much. Try a manual sync. I did. It won't take. Just goes back to 6:47. Jesus. Okay, I'm adding equipment malfunction to the incident report. But that still doesn't explain... Wait, Trent, are you watching your display right now? Yeah, why? What does it show? I looked down at the radio. 6:47. Still 6:47. Keep watching it. Tell me what happens. I stared at the glowing digits. As I watched, the numbers changed. Not forward, backward. 6:47 became 6:46. Then 6:45. The seconds were counting down instead of up, each one ticking away in reverse. "It's running backward," I said quietly. "My radio clock is running backward. Dean, what the hell is happening to me?" "Trent, listen to me. I need you to focus. Are you experiencing any dizziness, nausea, double vision, any sensory distortions?" "No, I feel fine, completely normal. But my equipment is going haywire. First the compass, now the clock. It's like whatever happened up there at that boulder, it affected my gear somehow. Just get back here. However fast you can safely move, do it. Don't run, don't take risks, but move with purpose. I'm putting together a medical kit and I'm going to call Dr. Pemberton, have her standing by." I don't need a doctor, Dean. This isn't medical. This is something else. We'll figure out what it is when you're back here safe. Just keep moving. I started jogging, as much as the terrain and snow would allow. The lights of the station were getting closer, but they were still flickering in that strange way, and the air felt different, thicker, like I was moving through water instead of atmosphere. Each breath took more effort, like the oxygen content was dropping. But my pulse oximeter, part of my standard kit, showed 98%. Normal. Everything was reading normal, even though nothing felt normal. That's when I heard it. A sound from behind me, back up the trail toward Pass 47. It was low and resonant, like the thrumming of some massive engine buried deep underground, but rhythmic too, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. Or maybe my heartbeat was pulsing in time with it. Hard to tell which was leading and which was following. Each pulse sent a vibration through the ground, up through my boots, into my bones. I didn't look back, didn't want to see what might be making that sound. I just kept moving, my boots pounding on packed snow, my breath ragged now from exertion and fear. The rational part of my brain was trying to find explanations. Seismic activity, underground water flow, distant machinery. But the primal part, the part that had kept humans alive for thousands of years by recognizing danger, was screaming at me to run. The sound was getting closer. I could feel it now, not just hear it. Vibrations traveling up through the ground, through my boots, into my bones. Each pulse was stronger than the last, more intense. And with the vibrations came that sensation again. The pressure change like descending in an aircraft. My ears popped painfully, then popped again, and again. Each time the thrumming pulsed. The lights of the station were maybe a quarter-mile away now. So close. But the sound behind me was closer, and it was accompanied by something else. Footsteps, heavy footsteps, crunching in snow, keeping pace with me, matching my rhythm exactly, not following me, walking alongside me, like someone was right there next to me, matching me stride for stride. I risked a glance over my shoulder. There was nothing there. Just the empty trail, my own footprints, and the darkness beyond my headlamp's reach. But the footsteps continued, clear as day. Step for step with my own, but offset by maybe 2 seconds. Like an echo, but more solid, more real. Like someone was walking in my footprints 2 seconds after I made them, following my exact path with my exact stride. I turned forward again and ran. Really ran, safety be damned. The station was right there, lights blazing. Dean's truck parked in the lot. I could see him standing in the doorway, backlit by the interior lights, watching me approach with concern evident even at this distance. The footsteps behind me broke into a run too, still matching my pace, still 2 seconds behind. But now there was breathing, heavy breathing, like someone exerting themselves, like someone running hard to keep up. But when I glanced back, there was still nothing there, just my prints and the darkness and that sound getting closer. I hit the parking lot at full sprint, crossed the 30 yards to the station door in seconds. Dean grabbed my arm, pulled me inside, slammed the door behind me. We both stood there, breathing hard, staring at the door as if something might come through it, as if something might follow me inside. Nothing did. After a moment that felt like an hour, Dean moved to the window, looked out at the parking lot and the trail beyond. There's nothing out there, Trent. You didn't hear it? The footsteps? The breathing? I heard your footsteps, just yours. He turned to look at me, his expression a mixture of concern and something else. Fear, maybe, or recognition, like he was starting to believe something impossible. Sit down, let me take a look at you. I slumped into a chair while Dean did a quick medical assessment. Pupils equal and reactive. Blood pressure slightly elevated, but within normal range given the circumstances. Heart rate elevated but dropping steadily. No signs of head trauma, no symptoms of hypothermia or hypoxia. Physically, I was fine. Better than fine. I'd just run 2 miles through snow in freezing temperatures and I was barely winded. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said, pulling up a chair across from me. "From the beginning. Every detail you can remember." I walked him through it. The check-in at 6:12. The pressure change. The missing time. Waking up against a boulder with no memory of how I got there. The rearranged pack, the inverted compass, the impossible footprints, the backward-running radio clock. The sound, the invisible footsteps, all of it. Every strange, impossible detail. Dean listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring at the table between us like he was trying to decide something. "There's something I need to show you," he finally said. He went to the radio console, pulled up the digital recording system. "I recorded your last transmission, the one at 6:12, and everything that came after. I want you to listen to it." He hit play. Static, then my voice. "Ranger Foster to base. I'm at the northern approach to Pass 47, all clear. We'll check in again at the summit." Then his response. "Copy that, Trent. Weather's supposed to hold. You should have a clear run." And then my sign-off. "Roger. Foster out." Normal, routine, nothing unusual. But then the recording continued. After my sign-off, there should have been just silence or static. But there was something else. A faint sound in the background, barely audible. That same thrumming I'd heard on the trail. And beneath it, something that might have been voices. Multiple voices, speaking in unison, saying words I couldn't quite make out. The language was wrong, the cadence was wrong. Not English. Not any language I'd ever heard. "What is that?" I asked. "I don't know, but it's on every recording from your patrol tonight. Starting at 6:12 and continuing until 7:47, when your radio came back online with you conscious and aware." Dean switched to a different recording. This one time-stamped 6:45. "Listen to this one." He played it. Static at first, then that thrumming sound, much louder now. And the voices were clearer. They weren't speaking English, weren't speaking any language I recognized. The sounds were too guttural, too complex. Words that seemed to have too many syllables, consonants that didn't exist in any human language. But they were definitely saying something, repeating the same phrase over and over. And the rhythm, the cadence, it was deliberate, purposeful, like a chant, like a summoning, and one of the voices sounded like mine. Dean saw the recognition in my face, watched the color drain from my cheeks. "You hear it too? Your voice?" "That's impossible. I wasn't saying anything. I wasn't even conscious or aware or whatever I was." "Well, something was using your vocal cords. Or something was broadcasting through your radio using your voice pattern." He pulled up another file, his hand shaking slightly. "This is the weirdest part. At exactly 7:30, 18 minutes before your radio came back online with you conscious, I got this." He played the file. My voice, clear and calm with no background noise. "Foster to base. I'm at the summit of Pass 47. Something here you need to see." "I never sent that," I said immediately, leaning forward. "Dean, I swear to God I never sent that message." "I know, but listen to the response." Dean's voice on the recording, tinged with relief. "Roger that, Trent. What have you got?" Silence. 5 seconds of dead air. Then my voice again, but different now, flatter, almost mechanical, like a text-to-speech program. The passage is open, the interval is correct, the alignment is complete. Trent, I need you to clarify, what passage? Are you talking about the trail? My voice, tell them the way is clear. Tell them the counting has finished. Tell them we are ready for the return. Ready for what return? Trent, you're not making sense. Silence. Then a sound that might have been laughter or might have been static. Then nothing. Then the transmission cut off. Dean stopped the playback. I tried to raise you after that, but got nothing. Complete radio silence. Then at 7:47, you came back online asking where you'd been, sounding like yourself again. Like you'd just woken up. I sat there, staring at the radio console, trying to process what I'd just heard. That was my voice, my vocal patterns, my cadence, my breathing. But those weren't my words, weren't my thoughts. I would never say things like, the passage is open, or ready for the return. What did that even mean? What did I mean? I said quietly. The passage is open. The counting has finished. Ready for the return. Return of what? From where? I don't know, but I think we need to figure it out. Dean pulled out a topographical map of the area, spread it across the table. Show me exactly where you were when you checked in at 6:12, and where you woke up at 7:47. I traced my finger along the trail route, marked the two locations with a pen. They were about a quarter-mile apart, but not along the trail itself. The spot where I'd woken up was off the trail, up a small rise that led to a rocky outcropping. The map showed it as a minor geological feature, unmarked and unnamed. That's strange, Dean said, studying the map closely. That outcropping isn't on any of our patrol routes. There's no reason you'd go up there. It's not a lookout point, not a known hazard area, just rocks. I don't remember going up there. For all I know, I was carried up there, or teleported, or materialized. Nothing about this makes sense. By what? We didn't see any animal tracks, and you said yourself there were no footprints leading to where you were sitting. No tracks at all except the impossible ones. I don't know, Dean. I don't know anything about what happened in that hour and a half. It's just gone. Like someone reached into my brain and deleted 95 minutes of my life. He studied the map more closely, then reached for a different file in his desk. Wait, I've seen references to this area before. He pulled out a folder marked Historical Incidents, Pass 47. Inside were old reports, some dating back to the 1960s, the pages yellowed and brittle with age. You keep a file on Pass 47? I asked, surprised. How long have you been documenting this? After the third weird report came through, yeah. I started documenting everything unusual related to that section of trail. At first, I thought it was just coincidence, people getting disoriented in the backcountry. But the patterns were too consistent, too specific. He spread the reports out on the table. 1967, a hiker reports losing 4 hours. Says he entered the pass at noon and emerged at 4 p.m., but his watch showed 12:30. He was found by search and rescue sitting on a rock. No memory of the missing time. 1973, 2 rangers investigating strange compass readings in the area. Both compasses started spinning, wouldn't settle on magnetic north. They described feeling dizzy, hearing voices, seeing lights that shouldn't be there. 1980. 2. A wildlife biologist doing a survey. Her recording equipment captured sounds that weren't there when she was in the field. Voices, mechanical noises, that same thrumming you recorded. She thought her equipment was malfunctioning, but every test came back normal. Why didn't anyone investigate further? Why didn't they close the trail? They did, or they tried, but there's no explanation that fits all the evidence. No natural phenomenon that causes time loss, compass malfunctions, and audio anomalies all at the same time. No geological formation that produces these specific effects, so they attributed it to equipment failure, user error, altitude sickness. Anything but admit something genuinely anomalous was happening. He pulled out a photograph, old and faded, the colors shifted to orange and brown. This is from 1959, a survey team documenting rock formations in the pass. I looked at the photo. 6 men standing in front of a large rock face, surveying equipment visible in the foreground. They were dressed in the style of the late 50s, work pants, flannel shirts, heavy boots. Behind them, carved into the rock face, were markings, not natural weathering patterns, deliberate markings, lines and curves and angles that looked almost like writing, covering an area maybe 10 feet wide. Deep grooves that caught the shadows, creating patterns that seemed to shift depending on the angle of the light. "Where is this?" I asked, leaning closer to examine the details. According to the notes, about 30 yards from the trail, up a small rise that leads to a rocky outcropping. Dean looked at me meaningfully. "Same place you woke up." I felt that pressure change again, just for a moment, just long enough to make my ears pop and my vision blur. The room seemed to tilt, just slightly, like the ground had shifted beneath us. "You think the markings have something to do with what happened to me? I think it's worth checking out, but not tonight. You've been through enough, and it's too dark to be scrambling around in the rocks looking for 50-year-old carvings. We need daylight, we need proper equipment, and we need to be prepared for whatever this is." He closed the folder. "Tomorrow, first light. We go up there together and see what we can find. And this time, we bring cameras, recorders, every piece of monitoring equipment we have. And if we find something, then what? Then we document it and get someone who knows more than we do to come take a look. Geologist, archaeologist, physicist, I don't know. But we can't ignore this anymore. Too many incidents, too many people reporting the same kinds of experiences. Something is happening at Pass 47, and we need to figure out what it is before someone gets seriously hurt. Or worse." I nodded, but my mind was still on those recordings, on my voice saying things I didn't remember saying, about passages opening and countings finishing and returns being ready. The words felt significant somehow, like they meant something important, like they were a message. But a message from what, and to whom? We spent the next hour going through all the audio files Dean had recorded during my patrol. Most of it was just static, and that thrumming sound, punctuated by occasional bursts of the voices. But in a few places, buried under the noise, you could hear those voices more clearly. Multiple voices, maybe 5 or 6, speaking in unison, repeating phrases in that unknown language. The sounds were complex, layered, almost musical in their structure, and one of them was definitely mine. Could it be some kind of, I don't know, mass hallucination? I suggested, grasping for any rational explanation. Something in the environment causing people to experience similar symptoms? Gas leak, electromagnetic field, something like that? Mass hallucination doesn't explain the audio recordings, or the fact that your equipment actually malfunctioned, the compass, the radio clock. Those are physical, measurable effects. Something physically inverted your compass and made your radio clock run backward. That's not a hallucination. That's real. Then what? What's the rational explanation here? What natural phenomenon does all this? Dean was quiet for a long moment, staring at the spread of reports and recordings. "I don't think there is one. At least not one that fits within our normal understanding of how the world works. I think we're dealing with something that doesn't follow the rules we're used to." That night, I stayed at the station instead of going home. Told myself it was because it was late and I was tired, but really, I just didn't want to be alone. Didn't want to be in my empty apartment, lying in the dark, wondering if I'd lost time again without knowing it. Dean set me up in one of the back rooms we use for overnight shifts, gave me blankets and a pillow, told me to try to get some rest. I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard those voices. Heard my own voice among them, speaking words I didn't understand in a language I'd never learned. And I felt that pressure change, that sensation of descending, of moving through something thicker than air, like the air itself was becoming liquid, becoming solid, becoming something else entirely. Around 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to the main office. Dean was still there, going through more old reports, drinking coffee that had to be hours old. "Can't sleep either?" I asked. "No, too many questions, too many patterns." He showed me what he'd been reading. I found something interesting. Every incident at Pass 47 happened during a specific time of year, late October through early December, and more specifically, every incident happened within a 2-week window. Not the same calendar dates, but the same astronomical window. The same 2 weeks every year? Not calendar weeks, astronomical weeks. The incidents cluster around specific celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, certain planetary alignments. He pulled up a star chart on his computer, the screen showing a complex map of the solar system. Tonight, right now, we're in the middle of one of those alignments. Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars forming a specific configuration that only happens every 19 years. You think the celestial alignment is causing this? I think it's a trigger, some kind of condition that has to be met for whatever happens at Pass 47 to actually happen, like a key turning in a lock. He zoomed in on the star chart, highlighting the positions of the 3 planets. The next alignment is in 2 days, November 16th, and according to the pattern, it should be the strongest one, the most intense. Strongest how? The incidents get more intense as the alignment approaches its peak. Longer periods of time loss, more dramatic equipment malfunctions, more detailed recordings of those voices. The 1967 incident, 4 hours of missing time. That was 2 days before peak alignment. The 1982 incident, extensive audio recordings, voices speaking in full sentences, also 2 days before peak. Tonight was 95 minutes, if the pattern holds. He trailed off, but I understood what he wasn't saying. If the pattern holds, the next incident will be even worse. Yes, and Trent, I think whatever happened to you tonight was just the beginning, just the first contact. The initial connection. Whatever is trying to come through, whatever is trying to return, it's using you as a conduit. It's tagged you somehow, marked you. I didn't want to believe him. Wanted to find some rational explanation for all of this, but I couldn't deny what I'd experienced. The missing time, the impossible tracks, my own voice speaking words I didn't remember. Something had happened to me up there. Something had gotten inside my head, used my voice, rearranged my equipment. And if Dean was right, it wasn't finished with me yet. We decided to head up to Pass 47 at first light, try to find those rock carvings the survey team had photographed in 1959. But we weren't going unprepared. Dean gathered every piece of monitoring equipment we could carry. Cameras with extra batteries and memory cards, audio recorders, magnetometers, electromagnetic field detectors, even a Geiger counter just in case we were dealing with some kind of unusual radiation. He also pulled out 2 emergency locator beacons, the kind that send a signal to search and rescue satellites. "If something happens up there, I want every second documented," Dean said as he loaded gear into his truck. "And I want someone to be able to find us if we don't come back." That's cheerful. I'm being realistic. Something took 95 minutes from you. Something made your equipment malfunction. Something used your voice to send a message. I'm not taking any chances. The sun was just starting to lighten the eastern sky when we left the station. The drive to the trailhead took about 20 minutes, winding through valleys still dark with shadow. By the time we started hiking, there was enough light to see clearly, though the sun hadn't yet cleared the mountains to the east. The air was cold and still, our breath visible in white puffs, and the snow crunched loudly under our boots. The trail was well marked and familiar, but this time I was hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow, every change in the air. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched, though I knew rationally that we were alone out here. The park was closed for the season. No other rangers on patrol, no hikers, just us and whatever was waiting at Pass 47. We reached the point where I'd checked in yesterday at 6:12. Dean stopped, pulled out one of the audio recorders, set it to start capturing. "This is where it started," I said, looking around. "Right here, I took 3 steps past this point and then nothing, just blank. Okay, let's move slowly. Stay close together and keep talking to each other. Constant communication. If either of us feels anything unusual, pressure changes, dizziness, anything at all, we stop immediately and reassess. Understood?" Understood. We moved forward carefully. 3 steps, 4, 5. I counted each one, half expecting to blink and find myself somewhere else. But nothing happened. The air felt normal. The trail looked normal. We kept going, following the path I must have taken during my missing hour and a half. It took us about 20 minutes to reach the rocky outcropping where I'd woken up. In daylight, I could see it clearly. A jumble of large boulders, maybe 15 feet high, forming a natural shelter or cave at the base, and above it, carved into the rock face, were the symbols. They were exactly like the photograph from 1959, but more extensive than I'd expected. Lines and curves and angles that looked almost like writing, covering an area about 10 feet wide and 6 feet tall. Some of the markings were shallow, barely visible, worn by decades of weather. Others were cut deep into the rock, as if someone had spent days or weeks carving them with precision tools. "Jesus," Dean whispered. "Look at the detail." "What language is this? It doesn't look like any Native American writing I've seen, and I've seen a lot of it." "It's not. I've been researching this all night. These symbols, or ones very similar to them, have been found in a few other places around the world. Remote locations, usually at high altitude or in extreme environments. But nobody knows who made them or what they mean. They don't match any known writing system, ancient or modern." I moved closer to the rock face, examining the symbols more carefully. Up close, I could see they weren't just carved. They were polished, the edges smooth and precise, the surfaces within the grooves almost mirror-like despite decades of exposure to the elements. This wasn't the work of primitive tools. This was done with something much more sophisticated, something designed for precision work on hard stone. "Dean, look at this." I pointed to one section where the symbols seemed to form a pattern. "This looks like a sequence, like it's counting something or measuring something." He came over, studied it closely, running his fingers along the carved lines. "You're right, it's numerical, but not in base 10 like we use. This is base 12, maybe 13? Hard to tell without more context." As we examined the carvings, I felt that sensation again. The pressure change. My ears popped, and suddenly the air felt thicker, harder to breathe. Dean felt it too. I could see him grimace and shake his head, trying to clear his ears. "It's starting," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Flatter, more distant. "Check your watch." I looked down. My watch read 8:47 a.m. Normal. But the second hand was moving strangely, jumping ahead by 2 or 3 seconds, then back by 1. Not smooth, erratic, like time itself was hiccuping. Dean's magnetometer started beeping. We're getting a massive magnetic anomaly. The field strength is fluctuating wildly. I'm seeing variations of plus or minus 5,000 nanoteslas. That's way outside normal range. He checked the other instruments. Temperature's dropping, down 5 degrees in the last 30 seconds. And look at this. He showed me the Geiger counter. The reading wasn't dangerous, but it was definitely elevated. Background radiation significantly higher than normal for this area, and climbing steadily. "We should go," I said, but my voice sounded wrong, like it was coming from someone else. "This is how it started yesterday, the pressure change, the equipment malfunctions. This is the trigger. Wait, look at the symbols." Dean was staring at the rock face, his eyes wide. "They're changing." He was right, the carvings were different. Not different in position or size, but in depth. The shallow markings were getting deeper, the deep ones getting shallower, and some of them were glowing. Not bright, just a faint blue luminescence, like bioluminescence in deep ocean water. The glow pulsed slowly, rhythmically, in time with that thrumming sound I'd heard on the trail. And then I heard it again, that thrumming, coming from inside the rock, from behind the symbols, like something massive was vibrating on the other side of the stone, trying to push through. Each pulse sent vibrations through the ground, through my boots, into my bones. "Dean, we need to leave, now, before it's too late." But Dean was transfixed, staring at the symbols as they shifted and changed. The glowing lines were rearranging themselves, forming new patterns, new configurations, and his eyes had that look, that too focused look, like he was seeing something beyond the rock, beyond this world. "Do you see it?" he said, his voice flat and mechanical, exactly like my voice had been on the radio recording. "The pattern, it's a message. They're telling us something. They've been trying to tell us for so long." "Dean!" I grabbed his arm, tried to pull him away, but he shrugged me off easily, moved closer to the rock face. His hand reached out, touched one of the glowing symbols, and when he did, the glow intensified, spreading to other symbols, creating a network of light across the entire rock face. "The passage is open," he said. "The interval is correct. The alignment is complete. Dean, that's not you talking. Come on, we have to go. We have to get away from here." He turned to look at me, and his eyes were wrong. Not vacant, but too focused. Like he was looking at something beyond me, through me, at something in another dimension entirely. "Tell them the way is clear. Tell them the counting has finished. Tell them we are ready for the return." The exact same words from my recording, the exact same message. That's when the rock face began to crack, not breaking apart from force or erosion, but splitting along seams I hadn't noticed before. The cracks formed geometric patterns, precise and deliberate, like puzzle pieces separating, and they revealed darkness beneath, pure darkness, deeper than shadow, deeper than the absence of light. It was like looking into a void, into nothing and everything at once, and from that darkness came light. Blue light, the same color as the glowing symbols, but this light was different. It moved like liquid, like smoke, like something alive. It poured from the cracks in the rock face, spreading across the ground, reaching toward us with tendrils that seemed to have purpose, seemed to have intent. I grabbed Dean harder this time, used all my strength to drag him away from the opening rock. He fought me, trying to get back to the symbols, trying to touch the blue light. But I was bigger, and desperation gave me extra strength. I pulled him down the rise, away from the outcropping, back toward the trail. Behind us, the thrumming grew louder. The ground shook. The blue light spread further, filling the air with an electric charge that made my hair stand on end. And from the darkness behind the opening rock face came something I couldn't quite see, but could feel. A presence. Something vast and old and completely alien to this world. Something that had been waiting for a very long time. We ran. Dean snapped out of whatever trance he'd been in about halfway back to the trailhead. He looked at me with confusion, then horror, then dawning understanding. What happened? What was I saying? The same thing I said yesterday. The same message, word for word. We kept moving, not slowing down. Our boots pounded on packed snow. Our breath came in ragged gasps. Something in those symbols. It gets into your head, makes you speak for it, makes you announce its arrival. Did you see what was behind the rock? When it opened? I didn't want to see, and neither do you. Trust me on that. But I felt it. God, Trent, I felt it. It was so big, so old, like it had been waiting there for millions of years, just waiting for the right moment to come through. We made it back to the truck, threw our equipment in the back with trembling hands, and drove away from Pass 47 as fast as the access road would allow. Neither of us spoke for the first few miles. We were both trying to process what we'd experienced, what we'd seen, both trying to understand what those symbols meant and what was trying to come through them. Finally, Dean broke the silence. We have to report this. We have to close that trail permanently. No exceptions. And tell them what? That there are alien symbols that brainwash people? That there's something trying to come through from behind a rock face, that we heard voices and saw blue light and felt a presence from another world. They'll think we've lost our minds. They'll put us on medical leave and send someone else to investigate. We have recordings, video footage, instrument readings. That's physical evidence. Of anomalies, not of causes. They'll say it's geological, or atmospheric, or equipment malfunction. Anything but what we both know it is. They'll rationalize it away because the truth is too impossible to accept. Dean was quiet for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. So what do? Just let it keep happening? Let other people experience what you did, what I almost did? We close the trail, but we do it quietly. We say there's structural instability, avalanche danger, seismic activity, whatever we need to say to keep people away from that section. And we keep monitoring it, document everything, until we can figure out what that message means and what's trying to return. The passage is open, the way is clear, ready for the return. Dean shook his head. It sounds like something's coming back. Something that was here before and is trying to return to this world. Return from where? I don't know, but I don't think we want to be there when it arrives. I don't think humanity wants to be here when it arrives. We filed a report that afternoon. Cited geological instability and magnetic anomalies that could affect navigation equipment and cause disorientation. Recommended immediate closure of Pass 47, pending further assessment by geological survey teams. The recommendation was approved without question. Nobody wanted the liability of hikers getting lost due to malfunctioning compasses or experiencing unexplained medical symptoms. But we both knew the closure was temporary. Eventually, someone would want to investigate further. Some researcher or scientist or curious official would demand access to the site. And when they did, when they went up to that outcropping and saw those symbols, the same thing would happen to them that happened to us. They'd become conduits, announcers, heralds of something that shouldn't return. Because whatever was behind that rock face, it was patient. It had been waiting there for a very long time, waiting for the right alignment, the right conditions, the right moment, and it was getting closer to breaking through. The celestial alignment peaked 2 days later, exactly as Dean had predicted. November 16th. That night, we both stayed at the ranger station, monitoring the radio frequencies, watching the instruments, waiting for something to happen. At exactly 7:47 p.m., the same time I'd regained consciousness 2 days before, all our instruments went haywire. Compasses spinning wildly, needles making full rotations every few seconds. Radio signals filled with static, and those voices clearer now than ever before. Magnetometers reading off the scale, showing field strengths that shouldn't be possible outside a research laboratory. It lasted for 95 minutes, exactly the same amount of time I'd been missing. When the interference cleared and the instruments returned to normal, I checked the recordings. The voices were there, clearer than ever. Multiple voices speaking in unison, repeating that same phrase in that unknown language. The phrase lasted exactly 7 seconds, then repeated, over and over for 95 minutes. And one of them, buried in the mix but definitely there, was mine. Even though I'd been in the ranger station the entire time. Even though my mouth had never moved. Even though I'd been conscious and aware and recording the whole thing. Whatever was at pass 47, it still had a piece of me. Still had access to my voice, my patterns, my frequencies. It had marked me somehow, tagged me, made me part of its announcement system, and it was using my voice to call out to something, to announce that the way was clear and the return could begin. I think about that sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, about what might be coming back, about what waited on the other side of those symbols, in the darkness behind the rock, in whatever dimension or realm or impossible space existed beyond that crack in reality. About the fact that I've been marked by it somehow, connected to it in a way I don't understand and can't escape. And I think about the compass in my pack, the one I found inverted after my missing time. I keep it on my desk now, in a glass case where I can watch it. Most of the time it points north like it should, the needle steady and true. But sometimes, usually around 7:47 p.m., the needle spins. Not wildly, deliberately, drawing a pattern in the air that matches the symbols on that rock face. The same symbols that moved and changed. The same symbols that opened to reveal darkness and blue light and something trying to push through from another world. The needle spins, and I hear that thrumming. Feel that pressure change. And for just a moment, I'm back there, in that missing hour and a half, aware but not conscious, present but not in control, speaking words I don't remember with my voice that wasn't mine, announcing something I don't understand to something that shouldn't exist, ready for the return, whatever that means. And sometimes I wonder if the return has already begun, if whatever was waiting behind those symbols has already started coming through. Because lately I've been hearing reports from other parks, other rangers, other remote locations, people losing time, equipment malfunctioning, voices speaking unknown languages, and always, always that same message being repeated. The passage is open, the way is clear, we are ready for the return. More and more voices joining the chorus. More and more people being marked, tagged, made into heralds for something that's been waiting in the darkness for longer than human civilization has existed. And I can't help but wonder, when enough voices have been added to the chorus, when enough heralds have been marked, when enough passages have been opened, what comes through? What returns? I don't know, but I think we're going to find out soon. Because the alignments are getting stronger, the incidents are getting more frequent, and the number of marked people is growing exponentially. The countdown has begun. The return is coming, and I'm going to be there to witness it whether I want to or not. Because I'm part of it now, part of the announcement, part of the opening, one of the heralds for the end of the world as we know it.